All right, folks, we're getting ready to start the online dinner party and looking forward to some great conversations and things of that nature. We've definitely had a lot of things going on in the world. We know that folks are still dealing with the various things that are going on in terms of the health pandemic that we're in the middle of. As a matter of fact, I just heard that there are a whole lot of empty apartments over there in New York City because of what's going on there with the pandemic. So even though they have recovered in terms of not having as many cases as other places, and are definitely seem to be on the road to recovery. Unfortunately, it has had an impact on their economy in the sense that a number of apartments are out of place and are not happening in that sense. So there's got a lot of empty space with their apartments. And I saw where Wuhan had a big time party. They were one of the epicenters as well. So they just went and had like a mad party, a pool party, and all of that. I don't know how I felt about that because, like I said, I know even here in the Carolinas, we've had folks go to college and then all of a sudden have an influx of cases and then decided they wanted to go strictly online. And of course, we do have the Democratic convention going on right now. So I did get a chance to see both Michelle Obama's speech on Monday, as well as see the speech that was given by Dr. Jill Biden yesterday. Definitely two different contrasting styles, but I thought both of them were very effective. There is no doubt that Michelle Obama is a very effective and articulate speaker, and even Jill Biden definitely used her school teacher kind of vibe and things of that nature. So she was definitely in there, engaged in the conversation and talking to folks as she would if they were in the classroom. But she did say that it's very saddening seeing a lot of these empty classrooms and a lot of people doing virtual stuff in this new reality that we are part of. So there's definitely a new reality in that sense as well. And of course, folks are still concerned about race relations and the relationships around our various cultures and things along those lines. So, that is another part of the ongoing conversation. And of course, we know a number of folks are concerned about their personal economy, myself included, because, unfortunately, things have been very hard and very difficult, no matter what business you're in, whether it's in the cultural arts world, as I have done a number of jobs in that field, or whether it's in the education field, and I've been involved with a testing company, or whether it's the number of other jobs. Even media has been impacted as well. So we do know that these are some very difficult times, and folks are trying to have to pivot and do things that are unique in that way. So we're seeing a number of folks that are pivoting into new existences and all of that. But, it's the online dinner party, and we're hoping to have some great conversations with a number of folks in the area to talk about how they're doing and to just kind of like enjoy a great conversation. And it is my great pleasure to bring with us a musician that has been known for many years around the community and is a great musician here in the area. I first met Ken Knox, even though I'd heard the name chairman of the board for a number of years. We have a mutual friend in the name of Ray Pascal. So Ray had told me about Ken Knox and how great a guy Ken was, and just told me about the amazing tradition that they have with their music. So, Ken, I want to welcome you to the show, see how you're doing, how things are going, talk to you a little bit about the music scene. We know that there's definitely some difficult times with what's going on. It's definitely impacting our musicians, our actors, all kinds of folks out of the creative world. So if you would, talk to us a little bit about how things are going and just share with us a little bit about your background. Like I said, we are a global community, so many folks, even around the globe, know who chairman of the board is. But, we've got folks in other parts of the globe that may not know about beach music and about your connection to it. So I'd love for you to just kind of give them an opening introduction about yourself and your musical journey.
Okay. Hey, first of all, Mark, it's great to see you again. It's been a few years. And you're right. Yeah. We have a mutual friend, Ray Pascal, great guy. Chairman of the board has been in existence since 1969 in Detroit, Michigan. We were brought up on that Detroit sound from Holland Dozier Holland, which were the one of the greatest writing and producing teams ever put together. They rival the Beatles. Some things the Beatles can't even touch what they do. But we were fortunate enough to go to have them as our bosses and as to have them and to have them as writers for some of the early Chairman of the Board songs, like "Give Me Just a Little More Time" and things like that. But my journey with Chairman of the Board started in Detroit. I like I said, the group started in '69. I joined the group in 1973. I remember I used to go in downtown Detroit. They used to have these things called the city festivals. So I was really still in high school. So I actually came out of high school into the group, fortunately. Now, what happened in my case, it was the center. It was so many people downtown Detroit at this concert, thousands. I could barely see the stage. So a friend of mine was the center on our basketball team. He was like 6'8". He said, "Hey, Ken, get on my shoulders." I said, "Man, I can't even see him." So he put me on his shoulders, and I saw these guys. I said, "Oh man, I love what they're doing." I had heard the records, but I'd never seen them. They were not your. Normally, you see a group that does routines and stuff like that. They were not doing that. It was like 4 individual performers, but they still came together and delivered. So a few years out of high school, I'm playing with the local group in Detroit, and in walks Danny Woods. Yeah, Danny Woods walked in, and back then they would have guys come in and sit, "Hey man, can I do a song with y'all?" We said, "Oh yeah, heck yeah." And I think he did High and Higher. That was Jackie Wilson's High and Higher. So we did that with Danny. And then Danny said, "Look, we're putting together a road tour band for Chairman of the Board. And I would like for you to come audition." I said, "Damn, I've never auditioned for anything." So I said, "Okay, I'll be there." When I walk into Invictus Records, there was the Funkadelics.
Oh, wow.
Yes, because only a small population of people know that the Funkadelics was the backing band for Chairman of the Board. So there was Billy Bass. All these guys were my idols. There was Billy Bass, Tiki Fullwood on drums, Eddie Hazel on guitar, Bernie Worrell on keyboards, Ron Bukowski on a rhythm guitar, and there was General Johnson, Harrison Kennedy, and Danny Woods. And I'm saying, I know I'm not going to pass this audition. There's my extent of the music business had been locally. So, hey, I made the audition. I was like, "Oh, I can't believe this." It was my first try at doing something like this. And that was in 1973. And I've been here ever since. Unfortunately, we lost General in 2010 to cancer. And I made him a promise, or he asked me to keep our legacy going. In 2018, we lost Danny. So Danny and I had gotten back together, and we toured for a little bit, and then Danny got sick, and he just couldn't come back out. And so what I've done, I'm keeping our legacy alive. I brought in 2 other guys. These are all Carolina guys too. Thomas Hunter from Charlotte, Brandon Stevens from Rock Hill, South Carolina, and we make up the new chairman. And I think you saw us a few years back. Those were the new guys, and our band is out of Virginia and some out of Durham, Greensboro, and Dunn, North Carolina. So we have been very fortunate to keep the legacy going through our fan base.
Oh yeah,
and at one point there came a time where I lost the name of Chairman of the Board.
Right.
And it's because General's estate had owned it. So now I had to regroup. That was in I'm sorry, 19. Wow, I'm going way back. That was in 2015. And I'm saying I've got to regroup. I mean, I was like stunned because I'll be honest with you. The family took the name from me. Yeah. You know, and I'm like, I've grown. This is how I grew up for 40-something years, and you come and take it. But hey, it happened. But I was reached out from Ray Parker Jr. You know Ray Parker, right?
Yes, I definitely know Ray Parker Jr.
Yeah. Yeah. So Ray called me up out of the blue, probably about 2016. Said, Ken, what is going on down there? He said, I'm watching what you're doing, and you're doing a great job by keeping the legacy going. And he gave me some advice on how to handle the situation I'm in. He says, look, we're brothers, musical brothers. He said, I played on these records. You sang on these records. We're still family. So long story short, I retained a lawyer, an attorney, and I'm proud to say I was able to get that name, you know, and wow. Because it needed to be, because people said, I mean, they've grown up with chairman of the board, and it was, and I had to come up with something else different, a different name, and it just didn't ring. It wasn't like, hey, that's the chairman of the board. So I was able to retain, my wife and we retained the rights to chairman of the board, and we've been rolling ever since. And I have to thank the fans for keeping the closest with what I've done. And I'm very proud to say I'm proud to be in the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame because they had my back as well, you know. Wow. And
I want you to talk a little bit about that as well. But first off, for those that are watching it from around the globe and everything, when I think of beach music, I think that it's basically just classic soul. I know that there's some other folks that sometimes want to take it and maybe take it in another direction, a rock kind of direction or other kind of directions. But to me, it's kind of like that classic soul. Would you agree that that's a good definition of beach music, or how would you define beach music? Because a lot of times they will put chairman of the board, they'll put Liquid Pleasure, they'll put Cream of Soul, some of these groups in that beach music category. Right. So first off, do you think of yourself as a beach music group, or how would you define yourself? And if it is a beach music group, how would you define beach music?
Well, you said it best. Classic rhythm and blues. Because when I first heard the term beach music, I'm thinking Jan and Dean, the Beach Boys, coming from Detroit, you know, because John said, hey, you know, because, you know, we did the national thing, the international thing. And he said, look, let's, after we left the recording company, he said, there's a music down in the Carolinas and Virginia and Georgia that they call beach music. And he said, we will be perfect in it. And again, that's why I said I was thinking Beach Boys, Jan and Deans, but come to find out, either the Temptations or the Miracles and groups like that, classic soul. And that's what it is. Only term where they said it was beach music, what I'm hearing is the kids would come down to the beach and they would sneak in and hear this music playing on jukeboxes. Our music, Temps, Gladys Knight. They gave the term when they came back home, say, oh, yeah, we just heard some beach music. So that's what I'm hearing about the term. But no, chairman of the board is an international group. You can't regionalize us, even though we're playing in the regional market. It's a niche market. And we've been very fortunate to have sustained in this market for so many years. One of General's philosophies was, if you're getting served breakfast in bed, why get up and go to the dining room table? Mm-hmm. So there it is right there. I mean, in the other world, you have to have a new record out every 3-4 months. Right. But these beach people, they give me the old stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's how we embedded ourselves in this in the Carolinas and making people happy. I mean, our people and white people. When we see African Americans come to our show, they say, "Where have y'all been?" And they say, "We love this." And I tell you what, a journalist once wrote, "What does Martin Luther King and the chairman of the board have in common? They bring the races together."
Oh, wow.
Yes. So he had it right. And that's been something that we've done for years. And that was great that this guy came up with that, because it's true. We Martin Luther King, chairman of the board, we bring the races together through music. So I'm listening.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The fact that y'all bring the races together through music, and I know that that's something that we're even seeing now in this era, where a lot of people are turning to music to kind of like have some feeling of hope. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, it's definitely impacted the music industry and things of that nature. But we do know that some musicians are doing virtual concerts and things of that nature. How is chairman of the board getting out there to the public right now? Because you're probably only being able to play in limited venues because of some of the regulations that are out there in terms of the size of venues, what's allowed, and things of that nature. So in this day and time in 2020, how are y'all continuing to engage the public? And the other thing that I was curious about is, could you talk about chairman of the board's appeal to the college kids? Because that's one of the groups that I always knew y'all had an appeal to and things of that nature. And by the way, I've got to tell you the same thing that I told my dad one time, and he's a little bit older than I am. He's in that 80-year-old range and definitely things of that nature. So I'm still trying to figure out, I need to know where Ken found the Fountain of Youth at, because I'm convinced that you found the Fountain of Youth, because you definitely still have that youthful appeal and that youthful look. So I want to know where you found that Fountain of Youth at and where we can get it as well.
I'm going to start with that one. I get that every day. Someone writes me, "What is your secret? How are you maintaining?" And because it said you still look the same when I met you 30 years ago. Music, number one, keeps you youthful, I think. And I always tell people I have a concoction. The concoction is 2 sparrows' eggs, a little bit of Moscato, a little Tabasco sauce, and I drink it every morning.
Oh, wow.
But that's not true.
Say that's not true, huh?
No, but you know what? My genes, my mother was like that. She didn't look her age. She looked 10 years younger than what she was at 15 years younger. I'm 68 years old. Right. And but I get that every day. The other question you asked was, what are we doing?
Right.
We did one concert since December. Wow. We did it maybe 5 weeks ago. And I told the promoter, I said, we cannot do a meet and greet. I said, in fact, I won't even come into the green room, because it was an outdoor concert. Mm-hmm. He says, no, my wife said, look, don't you can go do the show, but do not get out that van. Get off that bus, stay on there, and just have people bring stuff to you, And so I did that. Now, I told them, I want to see people with masks.
Right.
Or he said, well, we got it covered. We're using social distancing. We're having 6 feet areas marked out in the area, and 4 to an area. And then they had like a 10-foot barrier that the people couldn't come to the stage. But once the music started, all that went out the window. I counted, it was about 1,000 people out there. I think I've seen 5 masks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So once the music hit, they rushed toward the stage, but they couldn't come within that 10 feet. And I'll be honest with you, for 2 weeks after that show, I was counting the days. Mm. But, I had my mask. Obviously, we couldn't sing with the mask on, but right. Before show, after the show, we had our stuff on. And so it's still tough. Now, we are looking at what you're speaking about, doing these virtual concerts. Mm-hmm. We're going to have to do a few of them, because we can't, that we still, certain venues can't have but so many people. So I think we have to join the rest of the bands by doing them online. So that's our next move.
Wow. And the other question I was asking you, could you talk about y'all's appeal? Because it's been an appeal that's been there forever. I know that I talked to people that remember going to college way back in like the 70s and even some periods around that time. And of course, we know that kids even now know about Chairman of the Board, and it has like that universal kind of appeal among the college crowd. So could you talk about how y'all have maintained that college appeal and that appeal to the young folks and still to this day? Because I think I've run across folks that have told me that they remember going to Chairman of the Board concerts when they were in college, but they still are following y'all, and they're now well into like your age range, or maybe even a little bit younger, or maybe a little bit older, but they definitely do remember going while they were in the college experience. So definitely, I would love to hear your take on y'all's appeal to the college audience.
There's this guy named Joe Tronto in Greenville, North Carolina. He had one of the largest college clubs on the eastern part of North Carolina. He took a chance on us. He said, look, you guys, you're different. You know, I watch how the people gravitate to you guys during your shows. He said, I want to start bringing you on a regular rotation to my club. And the name of the club was called The Attic in Greenville, North Carolina. And when he would put us on, there would be lines around the block to get in. And we said, wait a minute, we are on to something. Year after year, so it started spreading from Greenville. It spread it to Raleigh. We started playing a club called the Long Branch. You remember the Long Branch?
Yeah, I definitely remember the Long Branch.
So like I said, from Greenville to Raleigh, from Raleigh to Chapel Hill, we were doing the concert halls like the Lincoln Theater. I can't think of the one in Chapel Hill that was a concert hall, but Joe Tronto put us on, because he saw the appeal that we had with younger people, and our audience is from 8 to 80, honestly.
Wow.
And like you said, some of those people are near my age, and now their kids are following us. It's beautiful, and man, we're very, very fortunate to have a following like this. You can't do this anywhere else. You can do it with the New Orleans sound. But we wouldn't even, I would say beach music, New Orleans music, the Memphis sound, and the Philly sound all have followers like this.
Right.
Always, because you run into people like Hall & Oates, and they say, "Hey, we cut our teeth on the soul stuff." And from Philly, go to New Orleans, you've got what's that band? The Meters.
Uh-huh.
They still have followers, from back in the day when they were playing. So we're fortunate to be able to have a young college following that's still with us today. And thanks for asking about that.
Hey, no problem. Another thing that I've noticed, I just want to know your thoughts on this, is there's another kind of music that I think of as being very similar to beach music, but it's not labeled as beach music. It actually falls in the blues category, because I also do some blues DJing. I'm a fan of what's called Southern Soul, but to me, Southern Soul is very much related to beach music. So there seems to have like a very much of a connection to beach music. So I'd love to hear you talk about that parallel between Southern Soul, whether that's Johnny Taylor or some of the more risque stuff like what Marvin Sees and some of the other people do, on down to like the beach music and the classic soul. But it seems to me like they're very much related. So I would love to hear you talk about the connection that you feel.
Well, they're cousins. Very, like you said, they're related. Now, we dabbled in the Southern Soul market ourselves. We've had like a couple of number one records in there because one thing about us, about being a national group, we still had national appeal even in the Southern Soul market because people were curious. Chairman, boy, wait a minute, they still around? And let me play this. And then when they play the music and that sound is there, and they say, oh man, this is good stuff. But Southern Soul is a cousin to beach music. Their followers tend to be older people,
right.
Older, but they are dedicated.
Mm-hmm.
Very just like beach people. They're dedicated to these artists like the Marvin Cease. Their stuff is so strong that a company out of Michigan every year for the probably the last 15 or so years, they would do huge concerts in stadiums, not stadiums, but in arenas. It was a Southern Soul show that had, it wasn't what Johnny Taylor was going in, but Calvin Richardson, some of the new Southern Soul artists, and some of the older Southern Soul artists, they would fill auditoriums and from Mississippi to Michigan.
Wow. So
their appeal is a lot larger than the beach, you know? And so I'm glad you mentioned those guys because they're doing it well and they're still happening today.
Wow. And another thing that I've noticed is that the beach music also seemed to have a appeal that crossed not just, like we said, around races, but it's also been used very much in commercials. I know there's been a number of commercials that have used beach music as kind of their backdrop music and everything. And we've also seen it even in the political spectrum. Like I said, I definitely consider myself to be more along the Democratic line and everything, but I've heard beach music groups performing in front of presidents of all ilks, both the Republican and the Democrats and everything legs. So it definitely seems to be very much of a global music, even in terms of who it can impact politically. So I was wondering if you could talk about that as well.
I didn't know that. Now I know about commercials because the Swiffer mop, they use one of our songs, Give Me Just a Little More Time, for about a good 4 years.
Wow.
I mean, in regards to commercials and stuff like that. And, but I did not know that this music was being played at political rallies and stuff like that. I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's been played a couple of times. I know that I was watching the Democratic convention. I definitely heard some music that was definitely soul inspired. I mean, whether that's John Legend or whether that's Billy Porter or some other folks. So I know the Democrats have done it. I've known that I've even seen the Republican Party use some kind of beach music vibes in some of their platforms as well. So I definitely think that it is used in those kind of political rallies and atmospheres as a way to generate crowd excitement.
And I think the reason being, some of their staffers, I'm sure, saw these groups when they were in college.
Right.
And I believe that's how they're using it because this is what they came up on and they integrated it into the rallies or whatever. But then again, as you know, groups like the OJs, they don't want their music being played from the president. You knew about that, right?
No, I didn't know about that. Talk to me about that.
They didn't want him to play. What's the song he had? People all over the world join hands. Right. They don't want them playing their stuff, you know. But as far as the beach music, only answer I can think of is those staffers and whatever went to colleges in the Carolinas, Georgia, where they had a steady dose of beach music.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. The other thing I was curious about, and you alluded to it earlier in our conversation, was the whole thing around the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. We have so many great musicians that have come out of North Carolina. I mean, the list goes on and on, whether it's Roberta Flack, whether it's Nina Simone, whether it's more current folks like Pierce Phelan, whether it's Thelonious Monk. I mean, I can go on listing all kinds of folks and everything. And one of the things that I've always said, and I was wondering your take on this, is I don't think that there is a form of music, including some of the kind of unusual forms of music, that doesn't have a North Carolina impact. I mean, there's even like a North Carolina band here in the Triangle that plays polka music. And I know there's some groups that do like Irish jigs and things of that nature. So I would argue that probably just about any form of music that you can think about, we've got somebody that's doing it and doing it well. So I just wondered if you could talk about your thoughts about the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame and what y'all are trying to do and some of your own connections to that. Because like I said, Gerald Johnson is definitely a vital part of that, the founder of Chairman of the Board. But there's been so many great artists here. I remember some that have more recently passed on. I was good friends with in my high school years and some of my much younger years with Catrice Barnes, of course, did a lot of great music up there in New York as the music director for Saturday Night Live and performed on a lot of other people's albums. But she fought a long time battle with breast cancer and then eventually lost. I want to say it was that she lost that battle. If it wasn't in the early part of this year, pre-COVID, it was like in the latter part of last year. But she had fought it for a number of years and lost that battle. So she definitely has some strong North Carolina connections and has played with a lot of people around the world. Her brother, Jerry Barnes, is still performing. I think he's performing with like one of the top jazz artists. And then we know that Chip Sharon, who's a local artist, has definitely worked in the music industry, was part of that classic rap song and had that bass line for that classic rap song and everything. But just share with us a little bit of your take on the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame and what y'all are trying to do with that.
I'll tell you this. There is a wealth of talent that has come out of the Carolinas, like you just said. I thank you for mentioning, is it Catrice Barnes?
Catrice Barnes, yes. Yes.
I'm going to have to look her up because I sit on the board of directors of the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. And that's one name that hadn't come up. And I'm going to take this back to the next meeting we have. But what we do is recognize in different genres, the jazz, blues. We've recently gotten to rap. We just inducted Big Daddy Kane, Ninth Wonder, all last year. We've had the Anthony Hamiltons. This year we cannot have our and every October, the third week in October, we would do induction ceremonies, but due to COVID, we cannot. So this year we're inducting Squirrel Nut Zippers. Remember those guys?
I remember those guys. Yeah.
Yes, we're inducting Jermaine Dupri.
Okay. His
father, catch me on. I can't even think his name right now. His father, something Malden. He's coming in. But what we try to do is recognize the talent people who have given so much to the Carolinas nationally.
Right.
And every artist that's in there has been definitely worthy of it. We've got, like you said, Roberta Flack, Andy Griffith. We've got my favorite, Maceo.
Oh, yeah.
by me being a sax player as well, Maceo Parker. Charlie, wait a minute. Charlie Parker. We got John Coltrane.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, John Coltrane. It's just, man, the Carolinas, every time that I read something or if somebody comes with a list, I said, whoa, they're from North Carolina too? Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, it's unusual. I mean, I'm not going to say it's unusual. It's just extraordinary of where these people come from. Where are they drinking? Because it's crazy. I mean, from like you said, from rap to rock to country to blues to jazz and opera. Right. We have a lot of opera people. And one thing I want to let people know that they need to visit the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame, which is located in Kannapolis, North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can look them up on the website, www.thenorthcarolinamusichallofFame.org. So check them out. And I tell you, that is one of World's Hidden Secrets, North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. So that's why I'm promoting it.
Gotcha.
No,
yeah, doing a great job of promoting it, let folks know about it and everything of that nature. So that's definitely amazing. You mentioned being from Detroit, and of course, you just mentioned that you play not just a vocalist, but you're also a sax player and things of that nature. Could you just talk to us a little bit about when your own, not just chairman of the board, but what got you first into music, and also what brought you here to North Carolina? Because like I said, you're definitely Detroit born and bred, but you've been in North Carolina for a number of years. So I'd like to know more about the journey to North Carolina and what North Carolina means to you.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think we are the adopted sons of North Carolina because chairman of the board is in the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame as well. So we feel like the adopted sons of North Carolina. Now, my extent by growing up in Detroit, you walk down the street, man, you might hear the Temptations come out of this house, Miracles, Supremes. I mean, you go down the neighborhood, music was everywhere. So you couldn't help but to be influenced by this. Now, as far as saxophones, I was a big fan of Junior Walker. And my brother was a saxophonist himself, my older brother. And he saw that I had a well, he would play it. When he would finish with the sax, he would put it over in the corner. I would go in there and put it together and start squeaking on that thing, you know? And so, true story, my first saxophone came out of Detroit riots in 1967. He bought me a saxophone from this guy walking down the street with it. And I wish I still had that on today, but I don't. But long story short, my influences was my brother because he played, and Junior Walker, who I became friends with. I'm friends with Maceo now. In fact, I inducted Maceo into the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame a few years ago.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and but in Detroit, man, it was just music everywhere. You know, singers, musicians. Like I said, Ray Parker, he came from there. A lot of instrumentalists. James Jamerson. I'm sure you've heard of James Jamerson, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yes. I mean, I met him when I was young, and he was a good influence to me. And met his family. I knew his son. His son also plays bass as well. But you just can't go around Detroit but not either singing or picking up an instrument.
Wow, so you had to do that on a regular basis, so it was almost natural to you and everything. What advice would you give to folks that are trying to break into the music business? And the music business can be very difficult. We know that there's a lot of things that are hard to do. I mean, y'all have been very fortunate in the sense that a lot of folks know y'all both on the commercial radio side, but also on the college radio circuit and on some of the independent circuit. But we do know that it can be a very difficult business. So what kind of advice to folks who want to break into either the music business or the entertainment business in general do you give to folks when they tell you that they want to go into that field?
My advice is very small. I always say, be true to yourself. You know, I can't tell you what to do or whatever, but I believe in being true to yourself, you know, meaning don't be influenced from other, you know, somebody in your ear say, man, you don't need to do that. Why don't you try playing this? Why don't you try playing jazz? Why don't you start doing? If you like what you do, be true to yourself and just stay at it, you know, because you never know when that door is going to open up. You want to be ready, and that's what happened to me in my case. I didn't believe I would ever make any audition, but evidently I was ready when that door opened. And like I said, I'm still here today, holding down the fort, you know, for General and for Danny.
Yeah. And doing a great job of holding down the fort and everything, doing some amazing things in that regard. So there's no doubt that you're holding down the fort and continuing to hold down the fort. So I know as a fan, we definitely appreciate your involvement and things of that nature. What's your take on the radio industry? Because, like I said, General and as well as chairman of the board definitely got some radio play, but there was a time that folks were to some degree frustrated by commercial radio. So what is your take on commercial radio and also on the bigger concert scene? So I'd just like to hear your take on those industry aspects of the music business.
Man. Commercial radio don't want to hear us. For example, I was the boy from the Manhattans. I can't think of his name right now. He did a show like yours last night, mm-hmm. and he was just right. You know, they can't get on commercial radio today. So most of our airplay is coming from the UK, from Europe, and independent stations, you know, internet radio stations. But I can't even answer that as to what's happening on commercial radio at all. I just know that I don't think we're right for it at this point. No. But there is an audience that want to hear stuff from the Manhattans, chairman of the board, Temptation. There's a huge audience out there. But it's going to have to take somebody to finally wake up and start, you know, hey, let's put this stuff back on the air, you know. So, hey, that's my take on it.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you're probably talking about, I think it's Gerald Alston that was with the Manhattans because he's from Henderson, right? He's from Henderson and that area. So I know a little bit about him having grown up in some of my growing up years in Warrenton, which of course is right on the other side of Henderson. So I definitely know that he is one of their proud children in terms of like a children of that community. So yeah, I definitely know that Gerald is loved and respected. So I figured that's who you were talking about.
That's what I was picking up. And he's also in the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame. But I was listening to him speak on it last night, you know. Commercial radio just is they abandon us, you know. But again, the slack has been taken up by the stations in Europe and little independent stations, you know, throughout the United States. So, you know, it's still all good, but we all still put out music.
Yeah.
Music, you know. So, you know, hey, I can't say we're satisfied, but this is what we have to do.
Right. And you mentioned the club circuit because I know that a lot of times y'all seem to do more of the college circuit and the club circuit. And I've always thought that chairman of the board should be getting some of those big concert halls as well, but not just y'all, but some of the other ones also. But unfortunately, they're sometimes controlled by big monopolies and things that are usually just wanting to get the top dollar acts. But I don't know why they can't have chairman of the board as well. Not saying that y'all couldn't draw, like you said, draw a crowd and continue to draw crowds, and not knocking the Janet of the world or the Red Hot Chili Peppers of the world that draw those bigger crowds. But I think that y'all could also draw a nice sized crowd in some of these bigger size venues. I don't know that you would fill a $50,000 seat venue, but I could definitely see you filling 2,000 or 3,000 seat venues.
Oh yeah. I mean, with a package deal for sure. You know, if they package us with like the Spinners, something like that, OJs, and I think that we need to have a place, you know, alongside those guys, you know, in those 3,000 and 4,000 seat auditoriums and theaters. We have done some, and but they call them beach music festivals,
right?
But we need to be back with our guys, you know, the 70s acts, the 80s acts. You know, we're comfortable on a circuit like that. But right now we're doing what we have to do until this pandemic slows down or whatever. But we still go to Europe 3 or 4 times a year.
Okay.
And that makes a big difference. So when that board is here, we go over there and we work. You know, the last year we were in right outside of London, and we did a show with Billy Ocean, the Drifters, the old school artists. But
Right.
for 3 days, it was probably 60,000 people.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because they've got venues all over the place.
Right.
And it was amazing to me to see how people, well, the Europeans, they love American music anyway, and they come to show their support. So I'm telling you, in the 3-day festival, there've probably been about 67 to maybe 80,000 people supporting that thing.
Wow. Now, I know Chairman Du Bois, like you said, does really good in the UK and does good around other parts of Europe. Of course, it's got a certain audience in America, but IBM.TV is a global network. I know one of my producers is out of India, which, of course, is an Asian country, and we've got folks that are doing stuff in Africa, like from both Nigeria and South Africa and a number of other countries that are involved in the whole IBM.TV platform. But I was just wondering, how has the group done, Chairman of the Board, in terms of reaching out to some of the other continents that are non-European continents, be that Africa, be that Asia, be that the Antarctica or Australia? Is that something that y'all would hope to go to? Have y'all had an opportunity to go there yet? How many countries have you, Ken, had a chance to travel to? How many places has the music business taken you to?
Germany, France, of course, England. We had a chance to go to South Africa back in the 70s, but we turned it down because of the apartheid?
Apartheid, yeah.
Apartheid situation. So we turned that down. But yeah, now I would love to go to those places. In fact, I had a guy who wanted to take us to India last year.
Oh, wow.
And but I think there were some issues he had to work out. And I would definitely like to look at that again. But hey, wherever we can do our music, we'll be there.
That makes a lot of sense. I can tell you that one of the things that one of the founders of this organization is doing, and that's Kim Calhoun, along with some others, is sometime in September, I think it's going to be late September, they're hoping to do like a 24 might be more than 24, might be 24, 48, or a 72-hour celebration of the music industry, but also a fundraiser to try to raise money for the artists that have been impacted by what's going on by the pandemic. So I know that I can, there's a number of musicians that have already been invited to come and perform either virtually or more likely everybody will be doing it virtually. But I would love it if we can get definitely Ken Knox, but we can get the whole band. I can tell you that as a one of the producers of the network and as one that talks to Kim on a regular basis, as well as the other founder, Nick Palveda, and our other major producer, Ankit, the gentleman I mentioned from India. I would love to have y'all come and do a segment as well. So I'm inviting you to come on that. As soon as I get the dates, I'll let you know, and hopefully you can come and do a performance for us, because we would love to have you involved in this fundraiser, because we do know that the arts is so important to us in these difficult times, and a lot of the artists are also struggling, but whether it's financially, whether it's the different other ways that we survive. So we do know that the artists are definitely struggling. So what kind of efforts, if any, is Chairman of the Board doing currently to help with kind of helping the broader art community other than the North Carolina Music Hall of Fame? And I've actually got the banner rolling across the screen about that. But what other efforts are y'all doing to help not just yourselves, but other artists as this kind of pandemic is going on and as more things are happening?
Well, I'll be honest. At this point, I haven't had many interactions with anybody else in regards to this.
Right.
There's one company called iVote.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So we're doing a virtual concert for them on election day, November the 3rd.
Okay.
And besides the invitation from yourself, that's about it. Okay. You know, I welcome the idea to help support, you know, my fellow musicians. You know, so just give me details whenever you get them. You have my information, and I'll speak with my guys, and I'm sure they would love to do it. And because we're part of the community.
All right, definitely looking forward to that. And like I said, this is a global network, so we consider ourselves part of a global community. But this is impacting all of the world. But one of the other things that's impacting the world is people's relationship to different cultures. So we do know that there's the whole conversation around Black Lives Matter and also around women's rights. This is the 100th anniversary of the suffragette movement and things of that nature. So that being said, I was wondering your own take, and then I want to put on at least one or two of your cuts before hopefully our next guest comes on and everything. But I did want to get to that. But before we get to that, I wanted to know your take on some of these more global issues. Being an African-American male, having spent some time in Detroit and having lived there, I just wanted to know your take on what's going on in the world in terms of people identifying and also going around and trying to have a more cultural kind of respect for folks. So I just wanted your take.
Whoa. My take on it is just about like what a lot of different other people take on it. I'm not a big political guy. I'm not,
Right.
I don't know if I can even speak on that.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that's bad or good. But I know what's right and what's wrong. That's the only way I can look at it. I know what's right, what's wrong, and I know what I want to see, and I know what's I want for my family, and my guys, but it's tough,
Right.
That's what only way I can answer that,
No, that makes a lot of sense. And there's some tough times that are going on. You're so right about that. But it sounds like one of the things that we've noticed about your music that you addressed earlier is that it is definitely a unifying factor. And it's one of the things that has gone throughout your music is that the music, and I would argue other forms of the arts as well, is a way that we use the arts to try to bridge the gaps and to try to unify people together so they can have a greater understanding of each other. So I think that music is one of the things in society that can be one of the greatest unifying forces in society as well. So definitely I would agree with you on that we need to find these unifying things that are going on in order to share that unity and in order to actually have a greater understanding of each other and of what we're all about. So definitely I wanted to say that's where I think we need to do is have more unity in our community. But I wanted to know, and I might get on some other songs as well.
I like what you said. Unity in our community.
Right.
I like that. And hey, thanks for pulling me out of that. Because you said what I wanted to say, but I couldn't say it the way you said it. But go ahead.
No problem. I did want to know if you could, because I'm going to put on one of the songs. I'm going to share some audio. So I wanted to know, we definitely want folks to know where they can reach you and how they can find you. But I want to know if you could talk to us a little bit about Give Me Just a Little More Time. And I might put on some other songs of yours as well. But right now I'm getting to bring up the song Give Me Just a Little More Time. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that song, what that song was all about, and how y'all came about doing that song. So I want to give folks a taste of Chairman of the Board. Like you said, you're so globally known that most folks will automatically know the name as soon as I say it, but there's some other folks that might not have that knowledge and need to be introduced to you. So I want to bring up.
Give Me Just More Time was the brainchild of Holland Dozier Holland. They wrote the song. And Jenna was like the first artist that they recruited for the group. And Jenna was singing lead. And because Jenna's voice is so unique, he sold that song. It's simple. Give me just a little more time. But he sold that song with this unique voice. And honestly, that kicked off the birth of Chairman of the Board.
Wow.
So it was written, like I said, by one of the Hollands and Ron Dunbar, who has passed. He also wrote Patches with General. But Give Me Just a Little More Time is a global song. Like I said, it's been in commercials, movies. It's one of our most requested songs, and it's a great song.
All right, we're going to give them a little dose of Give Me Just a Little More Time, and we might have a couple more songs that we'll put on as well, but definitely want to give them a dose of this particular song, which is Give Me Just a Little More Time. So thank you a lot for telling us about that, and look forward to folks hearing about that. Awesome.
Life's too short to make a mistake. Let's think of each other and hesitate. Young and impatient we may be, there's no need to act foolishly. If we part, our hearts won't forget it. Years from now, we'll surely regret it. Give me just a little more time, and our love will surely grow. Give me just a little more time, and our love will surely grow. You're young, and you're in a hurry. You're eager for love, but don't you worry. We both want the sweetness in life, but these things don't come overnight. Don't give up, cause love seems slow. Girl, we're gonna succeed with another blow. Just give me just a little more time, and our love will surely grow. Baby, please, baby, baby, please, baby. Love is that mountain we must climb. Let's climb it together, your hand in mine. We haven't known each other too long, but the feeling I have is oh so strong. I know we can make it, there's no doubt. We owe it to ourselves to find it out. Just give me just a little more time, and our love will surely grow. Give me just a little more time, and our love will surely grow. Give me just a little more time, and our love will surely grow. Baby, please, baby.
Wow, what a classic song that was and everything. So definitely appreciate you. That was definitely one of those classic songs, and you can't go wrong with that kind of vibe and everything. So definitely want to thank you for telling us about that. You mentioned earlier about the General's unique singing style. So could you just tell us a little bit more about that unique singing style and just your thanks on his unique singing style? Because I'd love to hear more of your take about the General. Because like I said, I did have the pleasure of meeting the General. Like I said, Ray introduced me to the entire group. So when he passed on, but definitely wanted your take on the General and what the General was all about.
Man, General was, I tell you, I mean, the voice that you know, there's five artists that you know, if they say two syllables, you know who it is. One's General, one's Stevie, one's Levi Stubbs, Smokey Robinson, and Luther Vandross. If you know exactly who these artists are, if they say hello, you know. So they are so different with their unique voices that it makes people's ears listen. You know, you tune in to what they're singing or saying. But General Man was one. He was a genius, to be honest with you. You know, he was our principal songwriter. I sat next to him. We produced after we left Detroit and came to the South. we started our own record label, and him and I we would produce the records and stuff like that, and he wrote them, and I helped produce it. And it was a huge loss. And you met him; he was a great guy. Yeah. If he liked you, he was for you. And he gave me a lot of opportunities. The whole time he was teaching me, and I didn't know I was being taught. If you understand what I mean.
So you didn't know you were being taught, even though you were being taught. So sometimes those are the best teachers, the ones that we don't even know that they're teaching us. So sometimes we're sitting there going like we're being taught by them, but don't realize that we're being taught. So I could definitely see that with General, and he definitely seemed to have that kind of personality that you would be sitting there going like not knowing what kind of teaching he was doing. Who were some of the other people that inspired you in terms of your own musical journey? Like I said, you definitely mentioned your relatives that got you into music, but as you developed your musical career, you've had it for so many years. Who are some of the folks that have inspired you or even continue to inspire you? Because I'm thinking there might be some young people that you're inspired by as well, because I think that we oftentimes are inspired both by those that have come before us as well as those that are coming after us. So just who are some of the folks that are either influencing you now or have influenced you in the past?
Well, one of my favorites are the Hamiltons.
Wow.
Those guys are very unique, and I love what they bring to the table in regards to that gospel style harmony. I love, harmony is one of my fortes. General, myself, and Danny, we used to do all our background and stuff in the studios, and we had similar backgrounds like those boys, because General came from the church, Danny came from the church. I never really came from the church, but I brought a different vocal thing to the three of us. So I'm inspired by Anthony Hamilton. I'm inspired by Adele. Of course, Aretha Franklin. And man, some of these young artists are incredible. Bruno Mars, man. Bruno Mars to me is a total package. Writing, producing, singing, and on stage. And see, that's what Danny Woods was. Danny Woods, he doesn't get talked about a lot, but Danny, let me show you who I'm talking about.
Oh yeah.
Danny right there, he was Mr. Energy.
Okay.
Mr. Energy, he a lot of nights he would get the crowd going, but he could sing, he could perform, and he was a total package. So I'm influenced by everybody that I've been with in regards to chairman of the board, General and Danny, and all the other artists that I mentioned.
Okay. Well, I definitely want to get in another one of your songs and everything, but I also want to bring in our other guest as well for this evening. That's Jillian Riley, who's running for Soil and Water here in North Carolina and things of that nature. So definitely hope that you'll stick around for the conversation as long as you can, Ken, and everything, because we definitely like to keep the conversation going and things of that nature. So first off, I've got to ask Jillian as I welcome her into the conversation. For the first hour, we've been talking to Ken Knox, who is a member of chairman of the board. So I was wondering, in your own life and everything, if you had the opportunity of hearing the classic beach music of chairman of the board when you were in college or just in your own life and everything. So I was wondering if you have had the pleasure of hearing chairman of the board.
Tell the truth. Tell the truth.
Well, good evening, y'all. I have not yet had the pleasure, but definitely down to always get some new music. So send it my way.
All right.
That is a good thing. And at least she was honest about it. She was sharing that she has not known that and everything. But we're going to talk about the office that you're running for and everything, but I do want to put on, before we get to that, I want to put on Carolina Girl, which is a classic song that many folks will know and everything. So I would love to hear you talk about Carolina Girl.
You say you want to hear me talk about it?
Yes.
All right. See, Jillian, who are you? You originally from North Carolina?
No, I'm not originally from here, but I'm definitely a Carolina girl now. So let's hear it.
Go. Yeah. So back in golly, I think we did this in 79 or 80. You know, Jen was saying, the Beach Boys have got California girls. Why don't we come up with, since we play for, we're doing most of our work in the Carolinas, let's write a song about the Carolina girls. And that song has it's on bumper stickers. Like you said, Chapel Hill adopted it. UNC adopted it. You see it on T-shirts, bumper stickers. The U.S. Open uses it when they do the golf thing. So we've got a lot of mileage out of that song, and it's talking about the Carolina girls, best in the world.
Sounds
I like
good.
that.
Yeah. So definitely that's y'all's take on it. So I was curious about that as to what is your definition of what a Carolina girl is. I know what the song says, but in your mind, what is the definition, Ken, of what a Carolina girl is or who a Carolina girl is?
Oh, my God. You stumped me again. You stumped me again. Let the music play.
I will let the music play. We'll let you have y'all's definition that way. So we're going to share with folks the Carolina girl and what that song is all about. I think folks are in for a definite treat. So definitely the Carolina girl. And this is Carolina Girls by General Johnson and Chairman of the Board.
In the world, you're so fine, girl, you one of a kind, sweet Carolina girl, Carolina girls, sweet southern world, you show enough talk, girl, ain't get enough for you, sweet Carolina girl, I love the way you walk. I love the way you talk. You're so fine, girl, you one of a kind, sweet Carolina girls. California girls are sexy, New York girls are too. Carolina girls got good looks and sweet personality too. Carolina girls. Sweet southern world. You're so fine, girl, you one of a kind. Sweet Carolina girls. You make me say, woo. Carolina girls. Sweet Carolina girls. Sweeter than candy, hotter than heat. More precious than diamonds, girl, you can't beat me. Woo. California girls are sexy, and New York girls are too. Carolina girls got good looks and sweet personality too. Carolina girls, best in the world. You're so fine, girl, you're one of a kind. Sweet Carolina girl, Carolina girl, sweet southern world. You show your tough, girl, I can't get enough of you. Sweet Carolina girl, Carolina girl, you're the best in the world. You're so fine, girl, you're one of a kind. Sweet Carolina.
Wow, another amazing song, no doubt about that. So
Yeah.
definitely appreciate that and everything. So y'all just do some great things. Ken, like I said, I definitely want to have you continue here in the conversation, but I definitely want to talk to Jillian as well. But before we get to some of what Jillian is doing, I wanted to let folks know if they could know how to find out about your website and how to reach you.
All right. And I do have to run. My wife is talking about. Right quick. Our website is www.thechairmenoftheboard.com, or on Facebook, Ken Knox on Facebook. And I would love to stay, but I was supposed to be out here at 5. She's looking at me right now. So listen, I enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed having you on here. I have to bring you back on some more so folks can learn more about what you're doing. So definitely we'll have to continue this dialogue. I know that my friend Zach wants to bring you on one of his shows as well to talk about the relationship between funk music and beach music. And of course, I'd love to have you on some more of our conversations here on some of the shows that I do. So know that you are always welcome. And as I mentioned before, we're going to be doing this musical fundraiser, so I'll be talking to some of my people and seeing if we can't get chairman of the board on that as well. One of the things, and I'm probably going to ask Jillian this question as well, but one of the kind of like almost boilerplate things that I ask people at the end of the interviews is if you can leave somebody with a positive message or a message of encouragement, as folks have been watching and listening to us, and the folks that might go back and watch it in the replay and everything, whether that's on YouTube, whether that's on Facebook, or some of the other platforms like Twitter and Twitch, what words of encouragement would you give to folks? So it's an open-ended question, but just any words of positivity or words of encouragement that you would like to share, Ken.
Love everybody. Mine's about love. Love everyone. And if someone needs a helping hand, if you got it, extend that hand to them. So listen, I appreciate you. Jillian, have a good interview. Mark, thank you. And I'm going to bring the other two guys with me the next time we come on.
All right. Sounds good. I look forward to that. Look forward to the conversation with the other cats as well. But glad to have you on, and we'll definitely be continuing this conversation and having more conversations through the course of this platform and IBM.TV. So thanks a lot. And definitely, if you get a chance, go back, watch the interview. We're going to talk to Jillian so you can find more about what she's all about and why she's running for the office that she's running for. So definitely she's running for Soil and Water. So we're going to talk about that. So I know you've got to jump off, but if you get a chance, do go back and watch so that you can learn more about this candidate running for office here in our Durham community.
I'll do that. Ken. All right. Bye, Jillian. All right. See you guys.
All right. Thank you. How's it going, Jillian? So glad that you were able to join us. He's a fascinating musician. Like I said, chairman of the board, has been playing, I want to say, since the 60s or the 70s. And Ken's in his late 60s, but has been playing for a number of years. So he's definitely a true living legend and things of that nature. So it was great to have him on to talk a little bit about his journey, a little bit about some of the things that he's done. So we'll continue that conversation on further shows. But I do know that you are one of several people that are running for Soil and Water and everything that's here in Durham. So first question I've got, and you actually kind of answered it when you were talking to Ken, was I was curious about your own background, because it doesn't seem like you are necessarily a North Carolina native, or are you a North Carolina native, or what brought you to this area and what brought you to interest in this particular job?
Yeah, well, once again, thanks so much for having me on. That was fun to hear that song at the end. I'm not originally from North Carolina, but I definitely found home here. This is, I think where I was meant to be. And the rest of my family is actually moving this way. My parents just bought a house in Durham, so they're coming to join me, and we're going to build our roots here. So I'm running for Durham Soil and Water Conservation District on an environmental justice platform. So I'm originally from Oklahoma, and my granddad and my great-granddad actually both grew up on oil rigs. And my great-granddad actually died because of an accident because of poor labor practices on the rigs. So I have it in sort of my blood, this environmental issue. And so I began doing environmental activism when I was just 15 years old. I started raising money for local farms as a way to stand up against factory farms, which we know factory farms, besides the environmental sustainable impact they have, they often, have very low wages. A lot of immigrants and people and refugees end up working in factory farms with just terrible, terrible labor practices. So about 6 or 7 years ago, when I moved to North Carolina, I worked on the coast of North Carolina, repairing homes that were damaged due to hurricanes. So I've definitely seen firsthand how climate change really impacts every aspect of a person and of a family. And then I've traveled, or I've worked all across the North Carolina, all across the state, fighting for clean water for communities. So I actually fought against Duke Energy's coal ash pollution. So fighting against corporate pollution and protecting our clean waters here in the state of North Carolina. Working with the Department of Environmental Quality on clean water regulations, the Utilities Commission around the cost of clean water as well. So I'm running for this seat because as an activist, we need to have an environmental justice advocate in Durham. And right now, we don't have that. So I'm running to be that advocate.
Sounds like you definitely got a lot of activism background and things of that nature. You said you grew up in the Tulsa area, and I know that Tulsa definitely has a rich Native American population. I've actually got some ancestry in that myself and everything.
Wow.
So I definitely was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, because definitely Durham has a rich Native American history, even if not a big population. But I just wondered any of your takes on Native American rights as well. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, yeah, I grew up, elementary school, we had Native American, American Indian traditions that we talked about all the time. We had a number of different tribes come in and really talk with our classes about that. So it's definitely been something that I've sort of grown up around. And there's a number of, amazing museums and heritage that is, well kept in the Oklahoma area. I know that Cherokees are really big tribe here in North Carolina, and of course the Lumbees down in Lumberton as well. And I've actually partnered with some of their activists as well, fighting the pipelines that have been trying to go through their community. Issues around sovereignty and tribal rights always come up. Who's acknowledged at the state level, who has federal acknowledgement. I mean, it's a totally an issue, especially around environmental issues, because what happens is corporations say, like, oh, well, I can build a pipeline through your native land. And, the reality is, sometimes they have jurisdiction and sometimes they don't. But either way, it's something that we can fight for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and definitely sounds like you've got some interesting thoughts on that. Another thing that I know just recently happened, and it wasn't in Oklahoma, but it was in Texas, and you mentioned that you had relatives that were involved in the oil rig, and that you also had, it sounds like, a relative that died in one of those kind of like tragedies. And I know there was just recently something that happened, I think over the last day or two in Texas was one of those oil rigs. So I was wondering if you could talk to us a little bit about your take on safety issues around oil rigs. Now that we have a number of them here in North Carolina, but I'm just kind of curious as to your take, having come from that area.
The labor practices are never going to be good enough, is the truth. Whether it's an oil rig, whether it's pipeline work, pipeline construction work, whether it's, working in a coal plant or a power plant, working in a nuclear plant, which we have some right down towards the beach areas in Brunswick County. I mean, working with toxic materials is a dangerous field. And I think we see labor practices, issues come out whenever there's unforeseen deaths that happen, right? But there's also long-term health impacts, right? So just because someone didn't fall from a rig or have an accident and they died doesn't mean that they're not going to be impacted later on. There's a lot of people that, for a long time never had any health issues, their family never had any health issues. And all of a sudden people are getting cancer, people are getting nasal cancer from breathing in the toxins. It's going in their lungs. I mean, it's not something that I think I think those issues of health impacts need to be discussed when we talk about labor rights when working with fossil fuel companies, right? Because I'm going to tell you right now, there aren't those exact same issues around wind turbines or solar fields, right? People don't inhale solar and then they get cancer. It doesn't happen because we breathe solar. It's healthy for us. And so labor practices really are just a narrow field in relation to accidents specifically happening in, on the property, but they don't talk about the long-term health impacts and how I think that also is because of the poor labor practices in working with, around fossil fuel companies.
Gotcha. And I know part of what soil and water conservation does is deal with things around farmland. And of course, Durham is a urban area, but there are farmers here as well in some of our outlying areas and things of that nature. So if you were to get the job and everything, what would your relationship be with both small farmers and big farmers? Because we do have both here in the area. So I'm just wondering, what would your message be to the farmers of the world? Because I actually, I'm a Durham native, born here in Durham, spent most of my life, and I'm in my late 50s in Durham, but I did spend some of my teen years in Warren County. So, and that's actually kind of the birthplace of the environmental justice movement because of some things that happened there in terms of dumps and things of that nature. But I'm just wondering your take on how you would address or how you plan to address, even on the campaign trail, those that are involved in the rural part of Durham and the rural economy that does still exist.
Yeah, so I'm really glad you brought that up because one of the things about this campaign that I'm leading and also just the position is it's not just the city of Durham, right? It's the entire county. So it's those areas like Rougemont, those areas that aren't getting as much attention, right? Especially in Durham elections that like they are represented in this position. So my background in, community organizing, one of the things I'm really good at doing is building relationships with people. So, I've gone out and I'm actually meeting with farmers one-on-one and I'm talking with them about their issues, about their concerns, about whether they've even ever been contacted or had a relationship with someone on the soil and water team before. And what I'm finding out is a lot of people actually haven't. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of farmers out there in our rural communities that had no idea that soil and water even existed or that we gave out grants to small farmers. So I just recently had a conversation with a woman who's very new in her stages of developing a farm. She has right now what's called a homestead, which basically means she doesn't have the IRS F certification to be considered a farm. Mm-hmm. And I was like, like, what are some of your issues? She's like, oh, well, like water is a big issue. Like it rains and then there's drought. And it's really difficult, especially during those drought periods, especially in the winter time, to be able to give water to all of our animals. She said that she's on a well system and they had an issue with their well that backed up and they had to get someone out to look at it. But her main concern was like, it might take 2 days to get this system fixed. And I have lives depending on me, not just her family, not just her kids, but also the cows and the donkeys and the goats and the pigs and the chickens. And, she has all of these animals that are depending on water source. And so that's a huge issue. And I was like, well, we actually have small grants, right, where we can help install cisterns or rain gardens to be able to collect water for exactly these moments, those emergency moments, and also the moments of drought, so that we can collect, right, water coming off the roof. And it actually will lower her water bill as well. And so, that's one thing too that I've been talking with folks about is like, there are opportunities to be able to apply for some of this money and reimbursement opportunities. So sometimes they have to pay up front, but then they can get reimbursed too, up to 75 or 90%. And so that's really what I want to do as, soil and water supervisor is use my organizing skills, use my ability to go out and talk with folks and just outreach better about our program so that new farmers definitely know that we do exist and definitely know that we're a resource for them.
And just out of your curiosity, you grew up in Tulsa, and that's definitely a rural community as well. Did you have any agricultural background of your own? Did you do any farming of your own, or did you have any ties in your own life to farms or to the farming community even not just here in North Carolina, but also in the Tulsa community?
Well, I grew up in Norman, which is a little bit further than Tulsa, but it is a city area. I would say, like I said, when I was 15, I did raise money for local farmers to support their humane practices, and supporting, locally owned versus some of the bigger corporation farms. But personally, I don't have the green thumb. I try all the time, especially in quarantine. I'm like, maybe this is my time to, bust it out and grow some tomatoes. And it's not my skill set, but I definitely love supporting some folks. I have a number of friends with gardens, and, I love getting in there and doing what I can, but I would say I need help. I need a lot of help to keep things growing. So I'm really good at connecting people with resources and opportunities. But in terms of farming advice, that's not my skill set.
No problem. I can actually relate to that because, like I said, even though I grew up in Warren County and might have done some small things with beans and cracking the beans and things of that nature, I would not call myself a gardener or a farmer. But I do agree that we are seeing more people that are developing gardens and farms. I've got a good friend who is doing canning. As a matter of fact, every time that I call her and talk to her, it seems like she's just having way too much fun with her canning because it's something that she's doing to break the monotony of her regular job and everything. And she loves doing it. And then there's a young lady that just moved here from Brazil. And every time I walk by her apartment complex, and we live in the same apartment complex, I'm amazed at how well this garden is being developed on a small plot in an apartment. So like I said, she's got squash and other things that she's growing, some flowers and a number of other things. And every time I go by there, I'm going like, okay, this is a little bit beyond my skill set as well. So I can relate to not having the skill set, but being able to admire the skill set. So I'm with you on that. So sometimes you have to know what your skills are and what you can do. So,
and I enjoy it. I buy the fresh fruits and vegetables from local farming communities. I'm all about that. So I definitely appreciate it and I support it. But that's, if I could grow tomatoes, I would, I swear.
Oh, no, I know what you're saying. I actually just got my weekly order today from the produce box because like I said, I support other folks in that way as well. And they just came in maybe about an hour and a half, 2 hours ago and dropped me off my celery, tomatoes, watermelon, and a number of other natural things from our local farmers. So I agree that we have to do things to support our community. So definitely that is something that I also encourage folks to do and that I try to do as well. You talk about your activism background, and I was just curious about some of your folks that inspire you. Because like I said, I know that I'm friends with a number of the activists here. I mean, I've known another Jillian as well. I've known our mayor pro tem for a number of years. I know Connie Lieber, who was probably involved in some of that stuff that you were talking about and everything. But I was just wondering who some of the folks are that inspire you out of the local activism community. And what drew you into the local activism community when you came here? Was you already looking for activism when you got here? Or was it something that you fell into because of some things that happened in your own life? But what drew you into it? And who are some of the folks that inspire you?
I would say I've kind of my whole family's really been activists. My first protest, I was 7 years old, and it was outside the KFC protesting against poor labor practices and animal practices. And I kind of didn't stop from there. I really just took off. It's really been something that is a part of who I am. My mom is a social worker. And so we've always had the conversations at the dinner table about, it's not like a lot of people sort of skip over politics. My household was mostly politics. Growing up, my mom was a progressive Democrat and my dad was a conservative Republican. And we probably watched 5 news shows every week. I mean, it was just always talking about politics and hearing them debate, issues from their contrasting point of views in a really respectful way. So he is now a progressive Democrat. So we've turned him. But growing up, that was part of my upbringing. And so, it really was something about how it's not just about the policy, but it's about the impacts that politics has on people. And it's about how we've seen that we see that in the community. And so I continue doing activism really throughout most of my life. And I love Durham for that. I always joke like there's a protest every week in Durham. And it's just about true. Between Raleigh and Durham, I mean, there's always something going on. So I would say my mom definitely is one of my biggest inspirations, just in the fact of how she's challenged us to think about, everything we do and the impact that we have and how that really plays out in communities. It's not just about what's written on a piece of paper, but it's the implementation of different policies that impact folks, and using my voice to stand up against that and saying, we do have a right, if we don't agree with something, to make that known. That is part of our right. And being really clear in that, if we don't agree with something, let's do something about it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was just, as you were saying that, talking about your mom and dad coming from opposite standpoints. My parents actually are both progressive Democrats as well, but I do follow our national political scene. And I know that the vice presidential candidate, Kamala Harris, while her husband, I think, is still equally progressive, I understand that they have a son who is very much conservative. So hopefully we'll get a chance to flip him as well, and he can actually join more of the progressive movement, because I've heard that he's part of like the Republican kind of factors and things of that nature. And I've got a good friend who's a photographer, and we actually tease him because he's definitely progressive, but his son is over at East Carolina and is part of their college Republican platform and everything. The good news about that particular gentleman is I will say that he is a moderate Republican. So there is, even in that platform, opposite extreme. So we put him at least in the moderate category. So that's good to know about him and everything. So we haven't totally written him off. So we have not written Morgan off, Martin's oldest son, because he's got two sons. So definitely have not written him off in that category. But one of the things that I know folks are very much interested in is also, when it comes to rural people and the rural life, is our migrant community. We have a very rich migrant community and things of that nature. So just in terms of your own campaign, what are you doing to reach out to them? What kind of platforms are you giving to, and things are you saying that are specifically addressed to our migrant community? And that is something that is very much important to people that are running, is how we treat those that are coming from our Latin American countries and some of our other countries that are coming from that kind of Latin background. But I was just wondering, how are you going to address some of the issues that they might have should you get into the office?
Well, one of the issues that's really prominent in, all over the U.S., but I would say in Durham right now, is food insecurity. So we're noticing this in, all different communities in Durham. So I've been volunteering with the Fed Up food distribution. It's every other Saturday in the Lakewood parking lot. So that's by El Centro Hispano and the Scrap Exchange. And it's in partnership with Carolina Jews for Justice, the Poor People's Campaign, the Fight for 15. So this is one way that I've been giving back and trying to connect with different folks and really address those urgent needs that we have in Durham. COVID-19 has shown us a lot, we have had a lot of reflection time to think about our society. And one of the things has been around food. I mean, our food industrial system, within, the beginning whispers, I feel like a few months ago of COVID, we saw food just fly off the shelf. And a lot of the food that went off the shelf was food that you can buy with EBT, you can buy with WIC. And so we saw a lot of our lower income communities be like, we can, the food that was taken are food that I can, buy for my family, I can buy for my kids. Because we do have some restrictions on what people are allowed to buy within those systems, which that's a whole nother conversation around that. And so, especially with schools being closed and being online, we now have kids who used to get 2 free meals a day, and now aren't getting that. And so, and I will say with the Fed Up food distribution, it's all about solidarity. It's not about charity. I definitely take home a bag of groceries myself. I'm a graduate student at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm living off student loans. I'm not actually allowed to apply for EBT as a grad student, but I absolutely would. I definitely looked into it. I've been on EBT multiple times in my life. And so it's something that I really is close to my heart around food insecurity. I think a lot of folks can relate to it as well. And the Fed Up Food Distribution partners with local farmers to collect some of the harvest and some of the extra harvest that people have. And so it really is a community-based event.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that really surprised me, I just want to know your take on it and everything, was that I'm a big proponent of folks being involved, and it definitely sounds like you're very much involved in our local scene and in local politics. I definitely think that while we need to pay attention to what's going on nationally, we also need to be very aware of what's happening on the local front. But I was actually somewhat surprised at the amount of folks that decided that they wanted to run for soil and water commissioner and everything. So I'm just wondering what your take on as to why this is such a popular field for folks to get into, because I think it's about maybe 4 or 5 of y'all that are running for the office and everything. So I was actually surprised to know that it was that crowded of a field. And some people may say that they know of other offices where it might be 15 or 20 people running for it, but 5 for this particular office does seem like quite a few. So I was just wondering, what is your take on why this is such a popular position for folks to be thinking about getting involved with?
Well, I will say Durham politics is always a hotbed for candidates. So I don't know if it's this role, if it's really just Durham. And it is, this is an unpaid position. So I kind of joke, I'm running for the biggest volunteer position of my life. And I think it's an exciting race. I think it's exciting for people to jump in the race. And I think good, healthy competition is definitely necessary. And it takes a lot. I feel like for me, even just submitting my name, officially putting my name on the ballot was a really big deal. I mean, it's an oath I feel like I took, even just filing for office to say, like, I am now, going to make sure that I'm representing the people of Durham. And that's a huge responsibility. It puts a lot of weight on my shoulders to make sure that, like, when I'm running my campaign, I am being inclusive. I'm talking about environmental justice. So that means racial justice. That means gender justice. That means health justice. It means housing justice. It means all of these things. And, for me, I take that to heart, and I really make sure that I am representing not just the farmers, but everyone in Durham as well. And people who could potentially be farmers, could potentially be growers, I think that's really important. So I don't know why people, jumped into this race, but I will say that, it is good to have some healthy competition, and, everyone's been super respectful of each other. And I really like that too.
Yeah, definitely seems like y'all have definitely been respectful of each other and definitely having some engaging conversations. You brought up the fact of the importance of, and of course it's a national issue, of both racial justice and of gender justice. And I'd love to hear some of your takes on that, both as a just general activist and just as, and maybe how you would tie it into the campaign, because this is the 100th anniversary of the suffragette movement in terms of like women's rights. And of course, we are seeing a number of conversations going around Black Lives Matter. I'm actually a big sports fan, so we even like seeing NBA players and others that are jumping into the conversation. But I was just wondering your take on both of those issues and how you might be using that conversation to even be involved in soil and water or to be involved in your campaign.
So, I mean, I've volunteered. I volunteer with Durham Beyond Policing. I've attended probably every protest in Durham, and a lot of them downtown Raleigh as well, around the Black Lives Matter. When I launched this campaign, it was kind of in the middle of this, right? Like, it was in the middle of this second wave of the civil rights movement, and there was some concern. It was like, I don't want to take away, anything from what's going on, but I also want people to know that I'm a candidate who is committed to these values. And when I say I'm an activist, I don't just mean for white people's issues, and I don't just mean for environmentalist issues. I mean for everyone's issues, and I mean that we're all impacted. I've been talking with a number of folks that are environmental activists that have said, like, I go to these protests. I haven't really been to Black Lives Matter protests before, but I'm going now. But help me tie in Black Lives Matter with environmental issues. There's a lot to be said, right? There's a huge connection, but specifically around police brutality. right, around policing, one of the things I tell people is our prison systems in the United States, a lot of them are located next to power plants. A lot of them are located in communities where there's poor poor air health. And so that's that's an environmental justice issue, right? And so there are huge linkages between general Black rights, right? General people of color, indigenous rights, and environmental justice, but specifically around policing issues. We have to make note that people who own these private prison systems also probably invest in the power plant next door, right? Yeah. And so it's not a coincidence that they're both next to each other. And then, gender issues as well. Women are the most impacted demographic in the world by climate injustice, period. That is the truth. They're most impacted by their health. I have talked with women in North Carolina and people in North Carolina who can't get pregnant because of corporate pollution. It's very, very serious in how when we ingest, when we drink water that's been poisoned, and how it impacts every aspect of our body, to the point where it has prevented people from being able to get pregnant, causing ovarian cancer and different things of that nature. So you can't take an issue and pull out a group of people and say, oh, it doesn't impact them. You can't, in terms of environmental things, that doesn't exist. There's a huge overlaps in every single social justice issue with environmental issue. It exists, it's there, but it's just not often talked about.
You're right about that. A lot of times people don't talk about that connection to the environment. Like I said, I grew up in my teen years in Washington, which is, of course, is the birthplace of the environmental justice movement and everything of that nature. And I've actually been a big fan of what some people might consider extreme environmental activism or environmental terrorism, because one of my favorite books of all times was a book called Ecotage, which was actually about a guy named the Fox who would go around in the Midwest and basically with what would amount to be corporate pranks, let folks know that he did not appreciate some of the things that they were doing to the environment. One of the stories that featured in the book is I think he went and got like a series of dead fish and things of that nature and somehow managed to sneak into the corporate office and drop it onto the president's office desk. So when he got back, he was greeted with a not too pleasant smell because he had left that message that this is what they were doing to the fish and doing to the environment in that part where he was at. And he's passed on, unfortunately. And like I said, I do think he served some prison time even when he was living, but he was definitely a very much of an activist. And I definitely think that some of them tactics might need to be used again, maybe in other kind of ways, but that's just my thought on it. I do think that sometimes we might have to do both radical activism as well as the more traditional marching. So I think that you have to have both impacts going on, because sometimes you have to slap folks in the face in order for them to get the message.
Yeah, I was working in Person County, which is just right above Durham, and there was a public hearing, and a woman walks in, and it was around water quality issues and water contamination issues because of Duke Energy's coal plant up there. There's a couple of them. And, similarly to your fish story, this woman walks in, she's older, and it was her time to speak. And she just walked straight up to the commission and she slams down a bottle of water from her tap water. And she said, "You drink it." And it was so impactful because it's like, they're not going to drink it, right? Because they know it's poison. They know it has chemicals in it. Even if it's like at the time, it's up for debate about whether or not it had chemicals, right? What's been proven that it does. But it's just like, I love statements like that, where it's like, you might pretend that you don't know, you don't agree with it. So you drink the water, right? So you're the one that has to go through that. It's like the same thing with the fish story. It's like, it's impactful, right? And it also puts them on the spot because none of them drank it. None of them were like, well, I'm not afraid, because everyone's like, it probably does have toxic lead and arsenic. So let's not drink that.
Yep, they left it alone and probably weren't even going to attempt to drink that water. So I can definitely see that. Now, in addition to the environmental issues, what are you seeing in some of your other important issues that you want folks to know about in your campaign. Because like I said, Soil and Water Commission has a lot of varieties of roles. And that's one of the things I was going to ask you is, what is your sense of what the roles of the Soil and Water Commissioner is, as well as what the role would be in terms of being the head of it? So I was just wondering if you could give us your impression of what you think the role is, and also some of your platform statements in addition to environmental justice. It's definitely very clear that you're very much about environmental justice, but I'd like to hear some of your other platforms as well.
Yeah. So the role of supervisor really is to support the staff. So similarly to city council, county commissioners, it's supporting the city and county staff. So the head of the director of the Soil and Water Department has been there for 35 years. He is so knowledgeable. He knows the ins and outs of the environment, the agriculture in Durham County. So a lot of it just goes with saying, well, you're the expert in your field, and I'm going to treat you as such, right? I think that's really important. And so it's a partnership. It's a partnership between staff and the board and supervisors. A lot of it is some of that boring stuff. It's reviewing MOUs. It's reviewing contracts. It's looking over budgets. It's looking over proposals. And it's making sure that there's an equity lens tied to each of our grants that we give out. That's one of the things that I really want to take a look at, because we get grants from the USDA, the federal government, and a lot of those grants have an equity lens. So particularly it's called for minority farmers. So people of color, women, and new farmers, by people that are really just starting out in the past few years. And it's an important lens because it goes into our calculations of who we give the grant to. So this ranking system isn't included in every single one of our grants. And so that's, I think, really, really crucial. And it's something that the current supervisor she's leaving, she had begun that conversations and really brought that to my attention of like, okay, we need to be reviewing these, our grant systems on the back end and saying, who are we prioritizing? Do we have an equity lens? Are we going to be supporting them? So that's a lot of what the supervisors do. In addition, so they build partnerships. So I've spoken with all of the staff one-on-one, and I've asked them, like, what do you need from a supervisor? And the consensus I got back was they need someone to build partnerships with other county and city elected officials, and state elected officials, So let me give an example. So one of my platform points is sustainability in schools. So I care a lot about our public school system. I'm currently the board chair of a nonprofit, Crayons to Calculators, and it's in Durham. We support our public school system. So I have a close relationship with a number of teachers, and I'm well aware of the systemic issues, the resource issues in our public school system. So the Soil and Water Board, they have completed a project a number of years ago at Southern High School, and it's a water conservation project. And basically what the project was, they collected water through a number of different ponds and filtration systems, and then they used that water to water the athletic fields, right? Yeah. So rather than paying every month for water, they collect the water and reuse it. And that saves the Durham Public School system $15,000 annually. It's huge. Yeah. So they're just beginning a new project over at Riverside High School, which should do about the same thing. Hopefully save the school but the school system $15,000 a year. So I'm talking with the director who's working on this project, and he was like, we need someone to go and make partnerships and strengthen our partnerships with the Durham Board of Education, with the DPS administrators, right? With the principals. Like, we want to be able to partner and really work more efficiently and be more effective in our in the work that we do, right? And so this is an example where, especially with COVID-19, we're going to see a lot of our city and county budgets reduced. We've already seen them reduce some, but I think over the next few years, we're going to see them reduced even more. And we need to be able to break the silos between our government and say, let's sit down. What are your priority goals? These are our conservation priority goals. How can we work together? How can we do something like a project at a school that actually puts money back in schools, especially if we're going to be losing money over the next few years because of COVID. So this is really what I want to do. And this is really what I'm good at in terms of like building relationships, looking over budgets, understanding issues, coming together and breaking down those silos.
Along those same lines, and I'm just curious your thoughts on this. I know that we have an extension office, and that extension office does stuff with like 4-H. I was actually a 4-H counselor for I think a year, maybe 2 years, but I did that as a summer job when I was in college and everything. So I remember doing that, and that was up in Warren County. So I definitely remember the importance of 4-H. But I sometimes wonder, even in our education system, if we're not doing enough of a job in terms of educating people about agriculture, about things like the extension office, about soil and water and things of that nature. So I was wondering, were you thinking about even doing connections with the extension office? Because I do know we have the extension office that does work with 4-H, and how would you work those relationships together?
Yes. So I've spoken with a number of folks from the cooperative extension, talked about the 4-H club. So let me say this. So we have the Durham Hub Farm, right, which is owned by DPS. It's an opportunity for students to come on field trips from all 53 public schools to learn about agriculture in a day. Besides that, a number of our schools have agriculture, environmental, sustainable teachers, right? And they teach those classes, those STEM type classes. But a lot of it relies on the teachers themselves. So, I mean, I've talked with a couple of teachers, and one teacher in particular, he got a small grant from Soil and Water, was able to build up his greenhouse, was able to build up his program. But it pains me that one, the only people that benefit are his students. And two, the fact that he had to go out himself to get the money. I mean, he basically was like, if we go to DPS and we apply for some funding, I mean, if it's above $50, you don't get it. And that's because there's so much need. Right? So if it's not sort of like basic, already given, textbooks, if it's anything additional, even for science classes, if it's like beakers or test tubes, I mean, if you need additional special supplies around environmental education, then you have to kind of find the money yourself. So I think there's a major issue because we have the cooperative extension. Soil and Water has an education environmental library. We also have our own education environmental programs. We work with elementary, middle, and high schoolers. And then we have a number of teachers out there that are really, really wanting this to be for their kids. I mean, I've spoken with a handful of agriculture teachers, and they love this stuff. They want to bring this to their kids. A number of them are ESL as well. So being able to bring in those types of learning, but we need more collaboration, and we're always looking for more students with our education program. I know that cooperative extension is always open to more students with their 4-H program, but it's difficult to do outreach when we're tied to grants that we have to get specific outcomes, right? And we silo ourselves. I mean, the reality is the Soil and Water team and the cooperative extension team used to actually be in the same building, but they didn't collaborate like they should have. And that's an issue, right? I mean, I think that we would use our tax dollars, and I think that we would use our county resources so much better. And maybe teachers wouldn't have to go out and find the money themselves, right? If we could really build up these partnerships, like I said, with the Durham Board of Education, with the DPS administrators, and figure out what are some of the barriers and what are some of the opportunities and how can we improve them.
Yeah, because as you were saying that, I was even thinking of some of the barriers that I go through and everything, because just as an example, I'm a big fan of festivals, and some of the festivals are in rural environments, and there are even places I would love to go to, but they're not exactly in, and I know this isn't your department, but they're not exactly in the public transportation realm. And I am a public transportation person, so I have to depend on whether it's going to Chapel Hill. I do go to Chapel Hill sometimes, or Carborough, depending on TTA, or whether it's our local city buses. But there are a number of places that I would love to go to, including some that have agricultural ties. I mean, definitely when we think of history, Stagville Museum, I'm 58. I've yet to go to Stagville. Stagville has come to me, meaning that Stagville has brought some exhibits and some things to me, but I've yet to go to Stagville because Stagville's kind of out in the rural part of the Durham County. The same with some of the other things that I would love to go to that are outside of our area, like Chicoria Hills. I mean, I've been there once or twice, but I would love to go every year, but I can't go there every year because it's not nearby. But some of these also have agricultural things that I would love to go to. Like, I mean, it's not exactly easy to get to Homestead Farm, and that's a thing that is definitely a farm area in the area. So even some of the things like you talk about going to being involved with Rougemont and things of that nature, I would love to go to that farm that you're talking about in Rougemont, but it ain't easy to get there from point A to point B. So I'm just thinking that those could be opportunities for possibly the soil and water department that you're running for to team up with like our data department and some of our other departments to make it easier to get to some of these things. Because I'm just one person, but I know that there are others that probably have similar views like mine, that they would like to go to these things, whether they're transplants like some of those that are coming to our universities, be that Duke, be that UNC, be that Durham Tech, or that there are folks that have been born here and have lived here all their lives, but they would like to go see some of these things that are more agriculturally based. Even, like I said, I go every year because I'm one of the MCs for the Eno River Association and that festival. And I do know that they have some association with Soil and Water and with the extension, because I know that I usually make announcements of some of our sponsors, and definitely that organization is listed as some of the folks that help them. But I'm just wondering if those relationships can be further developed and even shored up some. So I was wondering your take on that.
So definitely. And I think the issue of transportation is so real in Durham. I mean, so one of the issues I've talked about with teachers is, even just getting to the hub farm, which is such an amazing resource, is you have to get the permission slip signed, right? It's a field trip. You also have to get a bus, right? And all of that costs money for school districts. It's not free to have to, get a bus. You have to pay a driver. You have to make sure, all your sort of I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And, so I think that there's a lot of issues just in, like you've mentioned, we have all these different opportunities in Durham, but getting students there and making sure that they're supported and we have enough funding in the budget is a major issue. So yeah, I mean, I would say that, there's work to be done with building relationships with the I mean, we have relationships with a number of these folks. There's also the Ellerby Creek, which is a huge issue as well. I mean, it's a well-known polluted area, and we just aren't doing enough to support them. I've had a constituent, so I canvass every single weekend at the downtown farmers market, and I've met with a gentleman there a few times that has mentioned a soil erosion issue in the Ellerby Creek, particularly around a power line and a power tower. And he's deeply concerned. It's near his house. And he's deeply concerned that the soil erosion is kind of underneath the power tower, that it'll fall over in the next big hurricane that we have. And I've kind of been getting the runaround. I said, okay, I'll look into it for you. I've emailed, I've called, and I'm kind of getting the runaround in terms of who's in charge, of this issue, of this area. And that's exactly the point I'm talking about, is we don't have an opportunity to just sit down and say let's come together. 'Cause it's I think it's everyone's issue. I think everyone should be in charge of that. Right. We work on soil erosion issues, but then there's the the Ellerby Creek, association, that they also work on these things. I think, like I said, I think with silos, we also get some of this pointing the finger and who should be in charge of this and that, because we are so tied to our grant money. We are so tied to our funding and our budgets. But when we have an emergency issue like this, it sort of, people, I'm getting the runaround, and I'm running for this office being no, I need to know, who do we call? So I'm going to continue reaching out and continue trying to figure this out, because I think that this is an important, thing to understand. But, that's part of the problem, is that we have all these silos between governments and also between associations. And I don't think that we work as efficiently as we could. I think we're doing a great job, but I think that there's a lot of area for improvement.
It's interesting you talk about those silos because, like we had Ken on earlier, we were talking about the music industry and the creative industry, and I sometimes think that whether it's the creative world, whether it's the environmental justice world, whether it's a number of our activist communities, excuse me, we do get caught up in too much of the silos and too much of that silo mentality. I actually think that I was involved in a conversation earlier today with a gentleman from Iowa City, and he was talking about the fact that they have, and it's just an example of a way to deal with that. They actually have their art groups talking all the time to each other. So like not just having a art group commission or something, but they would actually have like, say, a representative, and it's just a parallel example of the Durham Arts Council, Motor Co., Pinhook, and the Carolina Theater, and these different organizations of different types. They would come together and have a meeting on a regular basis so that they actually are sharing some of their same vision and same things of that nature. And I think that whether it's the arts world, whether it's the activism world, that we probably need more of that. Because I know I know same lines. I've got a very good friend of mine who is a musician as well, but he's also been following the Black Lives Matter movement. And his frustration is that sometimes he doesn't know about those rallies, because I agree that there's always a rally every day or every week, but sometimes he would like to know about them, not as they're happening, because of course the social media buzz will get out there and everything, but he'd like to know about it a little bit in advance so that he can make plans to be there. Because, if he finds out about it, because he's got a job involving kind of our gig economy and everything, he's an Uber driver in addition to being a musician. But, he'd rather be able to know at like early in the morning that, say, at 6 o'clock there's going to be a rally, and not find out at like 5:30, because by that time he's already had to deal with his customers and his other things. So he does try to make it to a few of the rallies, but I do know that he would like to see more of a activism community actually communicating with each other on a more regular basis, so that we know about some of these actions happening well in advance. So like I said, I've noted there are efforts to do that, and there are folks that are trying to bridge that gap, but it does seem that we need to have better communication, not just with those within the community, because of course those of us that are in the community know about it, but we also need to find ways to reach those that are without the community, because I wouldn't say that he's necessarily involved in that circle of folks that would know, because they're part of that environmental conversation, they're part of that chain of emails and everything. But until you sign up on those lists and until you become part of that circle, it's kind of a closed circle in some ways. So I'm thinking that that's just one of the things that he talks about. I also wanted to tell you that we did have, and this comes back to our conversation, everything, a young lady, J.H. Kim, who's actually in Northern California, and they were just thanking me for having you on as an interview. And they also were saying that they felt that was a great point about public transportation and events in rural areas. But I was just wondering, for those that are watching, because we are a global network and things of that nature, so if there are folks that are watching that are not necessarily from the Durham community or the Triangle community, how can folks learn about Jillian's campaign, and how can folks that can't necessarily vote here, but they might have friends here, impact the race and give you support? So what are some ways that folks can give you support, even if they're not necessarily from here? Because IBM.TV is a global network, so there might be some folks watching from India or from like J.H. Kim from California that might be liking what you're saying, interested in what you're saying, and might want to show some support to you. So how can folks learn more about ways to help you if they're not here in our Durham Triangle area?
Yeah, so JillianRiley.org, spelled just like my name, .org. You can find all my links to social media on there: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I also have a TikTok, so we're doing some fun videos. Check it out. You can donate online. You can volunteer that way. I have 9 student interns right now, so we are running. I'm all about youth development and empowerment, so we're doing some really great trainings with them as well. So I'm also, like I think I mentioned, I'm doing a lot of tours. So I'm meeting with farmers. I'm canvassing at the market. I just uploaded today a new tab on my website called Cool Videos, and I'm uploading them so you can check out. I had a conversation with bee farmer Kamal Bell from Sankofa Farms. Really great, talking about the Black history in farming in Durham, and also why the Save the Bee movement is so important. So you can check that out. Tons of cool stuff, but JillianRiley.org to learn more about me, or to contribute or get involved.
And what are some of the things that have shocked you in the conversation as you've done these dialogues? Because I'm sure there's some things that you already, because we all have preconceived notions when we go into the interviews and everything, but what are some of the things that shocked you or that surprised you that you have learned, that you have had to maybe do some reassessment even of your own views, or that you did not know about before you got involved in the political campaign? So what are some things that you have learned during this process? Well,
I would say, so one of my top issues of my platform is hemp. So I talk about how hemp is the future. And before I even put my name on the ballot and I was developing my platform, I got on the phone. I talked with probably 100 people in the Durham community. And hemp was something people were really interested in and people were really curious about. I've reached out and spoken with a number of hemp growers and also hemp processors. So right now, the state of North Carolina is in their 4th pilot year of allowing hemp licensures. And so this was something I wasn't fully aware of, and I've done a ton of research since then, and I've really learned about the hemp process. And also, to be frank, how behind North Carolina is around hemp, right? I mean, this is something that, it's so sustainable. Hemp can be made into clothing. It can be made into food. I was at the Black Farmers Market last weekend, I want to say, and I bought hemp olive oil. I mean, that is so cool. It can be used in cooking. And so this is an opportunity that I wasn't fully aware of until I really began talking with folks. And I've made it one of my main platform points because people are so interested in it. And I really think it is the future in terms of economic opportunity and sustainability. Because like I said, you can grow a hemp plant and it can be made into so many different types of products. And that really is where we need to go because it's sustainable, right? It's sustainable for our earth. It helps, clear out the nutrients from our soil. It's positive impact on our water quality. So that is one thing I've definitely learned in the campaign process. And like I said, I've spoken with a number of people involved. I've actually spoken with the Cooperative Extension because they have an expert over there as well to learn about how we can do some more partnerships around supporting new and upcoming hemp farming, especially since we're just still in that pilot period.
And JH has just got all kinds of questions, and I don't mind getting questions from the audience as well. By the way, she was saying that wonderful. She said that your organizational website is excellent, and she supports your apiaries and work for the Carmel Honey Company, which was started by a 5th grade entrepreneur who's now a senior in high school, apparently. So definitely was supporting that. So definitely want to add that. And then they also said that South Korea has a long history of using hemp clothing. Yeah. But then their question, and like I said, I know that they're of Asian background, is what about people who dislike the smell of hemp or who are allergic to cannabis? So I think they were wondering as to how you would address those that might have some of those fears about the smell of hemp or are allergic to just the cannabis plant and everything.
So, hemp is funny because it is part of the cannabis family. It's sort of cousin to the marijuana plant. So it can get mistaken. I've spoken with some growers in and around Durham County, and they said that their neighbor, when they first became a hemp grower, their neighbor came over and drove by and said, "What are you growing?" Because it looks just like the marijuana plant because they're cousins, but they're completely separate plants. A lot of plants are green and have leaves, but they're not the same. I would just say in terms of being allergic, I don't know how prominent of an issue that is, to be honest. And I would have to look into it, but I would imagine that the way that it's processed could take out some of those allergens. But I think it's like anything, people that are allergic to peanuts, I have celiac disease. I can't take any gluten in. And so, we just have to be really clear with labels. And I would say that the hemp industry in North Carolina has done a really great job of being clear if it has CBD oil and if that comes from hemp. and being really strict about that so far, and I think it's because we are in those pilot stages, but making sure that folks know exactly, where it comes from and what it's made of is going to be important, I think, for whether it's allergies or just generally to have transparency around what the product is.
Yeah, and just to add to that hemp story and everything, I know I've mentioned on a couple of our other platforms as well. People sometimes forget the fact that the U.S. Constitution was actually written on hemp paper. So it's definitely been around for a number of years. Yeah. She also was asking that she's heard that the tobacco agriculture industry has tried unsuccessfully to transition to hemp. So we're just wondering as to what you're hearing about how the tobacco industry is doing in terms of trying to transition to either hemp or other products. So just wondering what your thoughts are about how the tobacco industry is trying to transition and how that is working.
So I know that in North Carolina specifically, we have had some success with the transition from tobacco farming to hemp farming. So a couple things. So a lot of the equipment that was used to dry tobacco leaves, for example, can be used for hemp. So it can be the exact same equipment. But the difference is it's a lot more labor intensive. So this is something that has to be picked by hand. It can't just take a tractor through a field like you could with tobacco. So that's, I would say, part of the issues with success is around you need a lot more hands, you need a lot more support. Additionally, there are issues around getting bank loans, right? And getting insurance for those crops as well. Those are some barriers that we've actually seen some racial disparities because of that, right? Just around bank loans and getting insurance. That's one of the things that I talk about in my platform is making that more aware and talking about that in terms of, who's actually able to get these licensures in the pilot program around hemp. So that's what I would say is that the other issue is especially in North Carolina, the tobacco industry, it was mostly sold to foreign companies, right? So it wasn't actually, nowadays, I should say, back in the day, it was used in the US, but nowadays, a lot of that is actually exported overseas. So that's going to be the main difference is there's not a huge demand on hemp to export it. And I'm not actually sure, but I think there's issues around legally being allowed to export certain amounts of hemp out of the United States because of the U.S.'s own, like she mentioned, you mentioned the background that we have with hemp. And so there's a different demand. There was a larger demand for tobacco. There's still this sort of gray area around hemp, but I do think that's where the industry is turning. I think that we're going to see a larger demand even in the next 5 to 15 years around hemp. It's begun to really take off. And I would say that, it's always good to have multiple different types of crop, like monocropping isn't good for the soil. And it is more beneficial for the farmer nowadays to have different types of crop. But because a lot of the equipment can be used from tobacco to hemp, I think it's a good opportunity for people that want to, work tobacco farmers and want to try to, do hemp themselves because they can use that equipment.
Yep. And she also added that in California, the wildfires had caused bad cannabis allergies and still having crime related to cannabis growing as well. I know that a friend of mine, I think Fernando, had mentioned some of the crimes going on in California, both in the cannabis industry, but also with some of their food trucks and things of that nature, because there's been a number of reasons that have caused some crime around California, particularly with the Latin American population and things along those lines. Yeah. And then coming back to the campaign, and I definitely want to not engage too much around the hemp discussion and everything, but just to come back to the campaign flavor and everything. One of the things I was curious about is, we're having a virtual convention. I mean, the Democrats are this week. The Republicans will have their convention next week. We know that it's not easy to do a campaign in the heart of a pandemic, in the heart of a COVID, the things that are going on around the world. So I should have asked you this earlier, but how are you doing your own health-wise and everything? And how are you managing to run a campaign when we're in this difficult time frame and everything. So how are you actually managing to maintain and do the campaign? Because you probably can't. I mean, you did go to the Black Farmers Market. I imagine they had things out there to keep people socially distanced and to make sure that it wasn't as packed as it usually is. But I was just wondering, how are you able to get out and do your campaign? And you definitely mentioned some of the virtual things like the virtual platforms, TikTok, and some of the others. But I was just wondering, how are you able to get out and get the word to your potential allies on the campaign trail?
So it is tough. As an organizer, I would be going door to door. That's what I grew up doing ever since I was a Girl Scout, was going door to door and talking with folks. And it definitely is difficult to not be able to do that. I will say that, I go to the Black Farmers Market. I'm every single weekend I canvass at the downtown farmers market. I volunteer with different organizations, and personally, I get tested for COVID every 3 weeks. That is really, I want to make sure that when I'm not talking with folks that I am as healthy as I can be. And I'm not going to, give anyone anything. And I also want to make sure that I'm healthy and that my family's healthy. So I get tested every 3 weeks. I also just got the antibody test done to see if my blood work to see if I'd ever been exposed, and it was negative. So making sure that I'm safe, making sure that my team is safe and that the community stays safe is a priority of mine. But I also want, you cannot replace the face-to-face conversations. And so if there's an event happening, I try to be there. I don't market at any of the protests. I don't wear my shirt. I don't pass out anything because I don't want to distract from the causes. But I do show up at the market every weekend, and I make sure that we are, we're talking with folks. How much do supervisors get paid? $0. There is some reimbursements for things. I think it kind of depends on the county. I think some counties get $15 to $60, but I was told that it is $0. So like I said, I'm running for the largest volunteer position I've ever had.
Could you talk about a little bit of some of your own activism victories that you've had? Because like you said, you mentioned that you were first an activist when you were 7 years old and did that work against, I think it was KFC or something like that. But whether it was both in your younger childhood years or even coming into your current years as an activist, could you share with us some of your victories that you've had?
Definitely. So I worked with communities all across the state of North Carolina who have coal plants, gas plants, or coal ash pits, all owned by Duke Energy. And I mean, the biggest fight was getting Duke Energy to clean up their coal ash pits. So there is a number of unexcavated pits around the state of North Carolina. And I mean, we went to public hearing after public hearing by the Department of Environmental Quality. We turned out literally thousands of people. With partnerships, we submitted like 50,000 petitions. And last year we led protests and all those things as well. So last year in 2019, on April 1st, April Fool's Day, the Department of Environmental Quality came out with an announcement saying Duke Energy was going to be forced to excavate all of their coal ash pollution. And this was a major victory. I mean, this was years in the making. People, even before my time, that were working on this issue. I mean, coal ash pollution first came out as an issue back in the 70s. I mean, this was something, I'm talking like years and years of decades of work. And I was so happy to be part of that movement and to really help push it over the edge in terms of like what we could do as our activism. And the next step was making Duke Energy pay for it. So we had to then, go back to the Utilities Commission. I've even earlier this year, I guess it was what month are we in? Yeah, January. spoke at a utilities commission hearing, which is where all the money gets decided in terms of how things are paid for by our utilities like Duke Energy. And they're going to have to pay for it as well. And so this is just, it's a major victory, because when you have a community that is polluted, right, their drinking water is polluted because they're on a well system and this is their well, and then they have this coal ash pit and it gets leaked, into their well system. A lot of these communities, a couple years ago, we got them on filtration systems on their well or on county well. So that was a huge victory as well. But the coal ash still existed, and it's still living. It's still by their house. It's still contaminating the air. I mean, it was just you can't continue to live near coal ash pits. And just because Duke Energy, maybe put a filter on their well system, if the water is still being contaminated, how long will that filtration system last, was the biggest concern for folks. And so we had a ton of major victories. But I think the biggest one was on April Fool's Day, where Duke Energy was required to clean up all of their coal ash pits around the state of North Carolina.
Wow. One of the other things I was curious about is how will you address the folks in the community that don't know a lot about soil and water, and how will you let them know, like you mentioned the grant that's available, you mentioned a couple of other things that you have learned about, but say you were to get the job, how would you make other people aware of that? Because I do agree that there are a number of things in our society that unfortunately we're not aware of. So I was just wondering, should you get the job, how would you let folks know about these grant opportunities, about things around agriculture, around maybe some of the hemp growing things, some of the sustainability initiatives, but just some of the things that you might be trying to bring to the forefront? How would you let folks know about that?
So I've already spoken with some current board members, because our website needs some work. So it's kind of broken out right now into case studies of each of the different grants, which I think is great. It provides some background in terms of what we have supported in the past. The issue is there's not a clear understanding of how to apply for these opportunities. So first things first, put a basic tab on our website to say, here's how to apply. Here's the steps to do that. Because right now how it is, if you want to apply, for one of our grants, the Community Conservation Assistance Program, for example, you have to literally know which staff member to call. So you have to pick up the phone, call the right staff member, and then they come out and do an in-person assessment. Well, what if you don't know which staff member? What if you don't know which grant? Right? A lot of them cover water issues. A lot of them cover soil erosion issues, right? A lot of them have some type of economic development opportunity, right? But they're for different people. They're for urban, they're for rural, they're for farmers, they're for new farmers, they're for, there are all these different criteria within each grant program. But if you don't know which one, you could end up calling the wrong person, and, they can transfer you to the right person. But what we need to do, that whole process is it's an insider's game, basically. You have to know who to call. You have to know what grant you're going to apply for. You have to know the deadlines for it. And we need to change that. We need to be way more transparent about how to apply for the money, who it's going to, how to get involved. So I think putting a tab on the website and being really clear about that. And then my suggestion is to just put an online form. An online form right there, and quick and easy, your name, your farm, a little bit about what's going on, so that the staff can review that and they can say, okay, this is going to be the agricultural ag grant. This is going to be the CCAP grant, and they're able to decipher what would be the best fit for them, for that person. And so I think that's one way, just to be way more transparent, way more equitable in who gets the funding, right? And really break down those barriers of being like, well, you have to know who to know, right? It's like, we don't need to have these insider games, whenever we're giving out money and opportunities and having a reimbursement process for farmers.
Yeah, definitely can agree with that. Kim was also asking, how much time do you spend on an average week attending hearings in board meetings and et cetera related to your activism? Because she says that over there in California, she finds that very time consuming. So she was wondering how much time on an average do you think that you attend, not just going to the soil commission, but maybe city council, county commissioners, and some of the other meetings that exist here in the Durham Triangle area. So how many hours would you say, or how much time would you say you spend on average?
I don't even want to count. I don't even want to know how many hours I have spent sitting in a chair at a meeting. So many, and the public hearings, they last forever. I mean, they are very long, at least the ones in North Carolina. I mean, they will go on until the last person speaks. So I've been to them where it starts at 6:00. We'll have like a press conference or a protest beforehand, starts at 6:00. I mean, I've been there till like midnight. I mean, you got to bring a snack, and you're not even allowed to have food in these, meetings, but you got to bring a snack anyway. So I've spent so many hours, city council meetings, board of education meetings, commerce meeting. I mean, I don't even want to count. I will say the one good thing about COVID is now they're all online, so I can do it on my couch versus sitting in an uncomfortable, metal chair. I actually bought this is funny. I bought one of those little chair pads to bring with me because I was so tired of sitting in these like uncomfortable chairs for just hours on end. And I would say, to that point, it's why do we have to do it? Why do we have to go to these meetings and be like, we should support education? We'll have to go to these meetings and say, oh, well, we should, make sure everyone has clean drinking water. Like, the fact that we have to do that is part of the problem, because no one, most people aren't going to be there for the full 6 hours. And it deters a lot of people. I mean, there's a number of people that sign up to speak and then they end up leaving because it's 10:00 at night. Like, they got work in the morning. So, I don't want to count the number of hours, but I will say I spend endless amounts of hours sitting at meetings.
And another person was asking whether Durham has public alternative energy. So they wanted to know about the public alternative energy and some of the thoughts around that. So I know you mentioned windmills and some other things, but what are some of your thoughts about public alternative energy and the conversation around that here in particularly the Durham area, but in the Triangle as well?
Well, that's a whole conversation as well. I mean, unlike California, we have a legislature that does not support renewable energy. So we go through countless, years of wind moratoriums that prevent wind development. Technically, we're number 2 in solar in the nation. A lot of that is because of lawsuits against Duke Energy for breaking federal EPA regulations. A lot of that is because of activists. It definitely wasn't out of the goodness of their hearts to put up solar panels. The other issue is, take Durham, for example. I think it was last year passed the 100% renewable energy resolution at the city council level. But they actually don't have a lot of power because of the North Carolina General Assembly to enact their own energy sources, right? They can't just put up, solar panels because of, people attending the meetings. Yep. Or they can't just put up solar panels because they want to. So, there's a lot of issues around independence, I think, at the local level, not just energy things, around setting their own minimum wages and other really important social justice, issues that we could tackle. So one of the things I've talked about a lot with people is just even our light bulbs. So the lights on the street lamps are owned by Duke Energy. So they use the old standard light bulb. They don't use LED light bulbs. This costs the county thousands of dollars a year, thousands. And I'm like, but we can't actually force Duke Energy to use a different light bulb because they own them. I'm like, there's so many different levels of conservation that we could work on. But if we could just get them to use LED light bulbs, then that we're paying for these light bulbs, paying for the lights, right? We could actually save thousands of dollars at the county level. So there are tons of issues around environmental, renewable energy options that we just can't do because of the state's power over local municipalities.
Wow. What is the makeup of the board currently in terms of both gender, race, class? So how is the board's makeup compared to society in general? So how is the board's makeup, and is it something that needs to be worked on, or do you think that it's reflective of our community?
It's pretty much everyone's included. We also have a number of associate supervisors, which I'm an associate supervisor. We definitely have women. We have some Black women. We have some white women. We have some Black men. We have some white men. I guess I would say that's it. We don't have any Latinx folks, which definitely is a concern. But we have young folks. We have some older folks. We have people who are kind of like me, who are, well, I guess I'm the only activist, but we have people who live in rural areas. We have people who are longtime farmers. We have some folks that have, come from farming families. And so I think we have a pretty diverse sort of people and also thoughts. So that would be my contribution. The difference between me and both the other candidates and also the current board is that I have this environmental justice activism background that I think is sorely missing from the board. And I think would really, really complement what is currently going on.
And definitely Jade was asking, making a statement, said that their county voted for public alternative energy and is now tied to the private grid, which is owned by PG&E, which killed Paradise, California citizens through neglect in related wildfires. So they were making that comment. And then they also said, were asking whether former Senators Edwards and Gore were supportive of alternative energy. And I'm not sure about that. So I don't know if you are, Jillian, if you're aware of what their support has been and things of that nature. But that's a question that they were asking. And like I said, I don't have any knowledge one way or the other. And then they made the comment that some elected boards here are still older, retired white men, and that's great that you have all that diversity. So they're actually saying that we've got good diversity compared to some of the boards out there in the West Coast. And I would even argue that that's probably the case even if we were to go further up north, like some of the boards that exist in some of our places like New York and New Jersey and some of the other places. So unfortunately, Durham has always got a rich diversity history. So I think that that's reflective in a number of our elected offices and a number of our boards, not just the soil and water conservation, but also our city council and our county commissioners and a number of other kind of activities like that. I'd asked you earlier, but I didn't really get a feel as to what your answer was. But could you talk about some of the local activists who have inspired you? Because I'd asked you that earlier, but I didn't really get an answer to you. But are there any sort of of our local activists that you are big time fans of and supporters of? So just wondering who some of the activists in our community that inspire you.
Sure. So a couple of people. I mean, Jillian Johnson is definitely someone, and she knows I look up to her, to be an activist and have an organizing background and, get into local politics. I mean, I just think we need more activists in politics. So she is definitely someone that I, feel inspired by, and the work that she's done, with Durham for All and groups like that as well. Someone else who I, really enjoy and is a friend of mine is Keith Bullard. He's the Fight for 15 leader. He also works a lot with the Poor People's Campaign. I don't know if you ever gone to any of the Fight for 15 protests, but they're literally so much fun. Like they have such a way of bringing in, both like the power of the people, and they most recently they had one outside. It was the workers' strike outside of McDonald's near downtown, and they have like drumming that comes in, and they just bring this energy that is just so powerful, and I really, really love it. And he's just done such an amazing job. I mean, he does organizing in Durham, in North Carolina, regionally. He does work, so he's a good friend of mine, and just someone that I really look up to as well.
Yeah, those are two great folks to have as people that you look up to and everything. I know that even one of the people that I'm a big fan of is Reverend Barber and his Poor People's Campaign. And I know that he's definitely been involved in trying to bring the environmental movement as well as some of the more traditional elements of the Poor People's Campaign into the struggle as well. So it definitely seems that he's definitely tied the environmental movement into things. So that's good to see.
Yeah.
How strong
his son William is, I was just gonna say, his son William is a acquaintance and friend of mine, and so he's really great too.
Oh yeah. His son is that whole family is amazing, and they're doing some great work. And speaking of William, I was wondering, how do you feel, or how will you try to reach out? Because I mean, part of it is trying to reach out to our young folks, and you're relatively young yourself. But how will you get the college kids engaged in the campaign? Be that Central, be that Duke, be that Durham Tech. But how will you get them engaged in the campaign and pull them into being supportive of you?
Well, I mentioned I have 9 student interns, so both at Duke and Central University. So I have them working on my campaign. I just recently spoke at an environmental panel by incoming Duke students to talk about environmental justice issues in North Carolina as well. So I think it's really important. I mean, I also have a TikTok. I have a TikTok for this generation. I'm targeting the college students. That's who I'm doing it for. So we get younger people. I mean, we know that nationally it's a major issue because not enough young people vote. It's such a concern, and there's issues too around, especially, I mean, at Duke University, we still have students there, but, where they live, where their dorm is, it depends on what address they have to use to be able to register. And so, I've gone to You Can Vote trainings, and they're working really hard to get students registered to vote. A friend of mine is You Can Vote student ambassador at Duke University, working to do that as well. So, I'm doing everything I can, both virtually and also and we're recruiting more interns, especially as the campaign really gets closer and closer to election day, to learn how to do social media and do a lot of digital work as well. So hopefully, I've done a lot of groundwork to get them involved, and hopefully we'll continue to do that.
Yeah, you're doing, seems like a great job of that and everything. I'm already impressed. I've actually got a TikTok account as well. I don't know that I've necessarily ever created anything on it. I think I've just got it there because I want to use it to reach, like you said, that audience. I've also got, which I do use on this platform, a Twitch account, even though I don't have a total understanding of how Twitch or TikTok work because it's not in my age range, but I'm trying to stay current and trying to stay with it to reach all of the different audiences. So definitely I can understand that. I'm going to have to play with my own TikTok account to see how I can make it work, because it's unfortunately it's not something that's easily navigatable for me yet, but I'm going to see if I can't get it going. I know we're getting ready to wrap up and wind everything down, but before we do, you alluded to and I'd love to have my people talk about all kinds of things. And of course, we're both international. Yeah, we're definitely an international network. So I was just wondering if you could give us kind of your insight on what you think is going on nationally, and whether what's going on in our own politics, meaning our local politics. If you want to explore or tell us what you think of the world and the world in general, and places that you might want to go visit in the world. I gave that opportunity to Ken, so I'll give that opportunity to you as well. Even though you're running for a Durham office, I would love to hear your take on our national, meaning the United States political landscape, and your take on the world in general and how the world is coping at this time.
I mean, nationally, we are in a crisis, and we've been in a crisis for the past 4 years, more than I think we've seen in my lifetime and potentially your lifetime as well. And so, even just recently, I mean, with the Postal Service, Trump trying to defund the U.S. Postal Service and he says overtly to prevent people from voting. It's like between that and the fake news and, preventing certain news stations from being in the press room. I mean, I just feel like it's like we're coming to terms with, is this the type of government we want? Do we have a democracy anymore? And we're being faced with some real realities of, if he is reelected for another 4 years, can we even imagine what he'll try to do? Because I think some of the things that he has done were our worst nightmares come true. And I just question, it's like, part of me wonders, like, no way he can do worse, right? He's locking up children at the border. No way he can do worse than that. And I think the truth is he will. He absolutely will. And, I've stopped being surprised by what happens, but at the same time, I still have hope for humanity. And so there's a part of me that's like, hopefully he won't do that. And then he comes out with another thing. And so, it's a crazy election. It's absolutely insane. I'm behind, mail-in voting. I tell people, we need to have a backup plan. If you're going to go vote in person, if that's what you've always done, that's what you want to do, even with COVID, that's okay. But have a backup plan. And that means getting a mail-in ballot and making sure, because if something goes down, we're about 11 weeks away from the election. If something happens between today and 11 weeks from today, where all of a sudden our polling stations are closing or the Postal Service gets defunded, we don't know, then you need to have a backup plan. And that means getting a mail-in ballot just in case.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then I was asking you what your perception is of the world in general and just how the world is doing. I know it's a very broad question, but also I just wanted to know your perception. And then it was kind of like a wish list question, because like I said, we are a global network. So even though you're running for Durham, you moved here from Norman, Oklahoma, I was just curious if there are places around the world that are on your wish list of places to go, because we might have folks that are from that part of the world that whenever we open up might invite you to that part of the world. But just curious about your view of the world in general and also places that you would like to visit.
Well, I would say the world in general is also going through the pandemic like we are. I think that a lot of them are coming back from it, and handling it in a lot better ways. Italy was one of the first outbreaks, and we've seen them just make a rapid 180 as they've really been tackling this issue. There's so many places I would like to go. I mean, definitely sort of the classics, Paris. I mean, I've been to Denmark before, which is sort of a small little country that not a lot of folks go to, but I really loved and enjoyed that as well. But definitely the big ones, Paris and Ireland and, England. There's so many places I would love to go. And, hopefully I'm in grad school, but once I finish grad school and maybe have an opportunity to travel before work, I would love to be able to just take my time and spend a month or so traveling parts of Europe.
Cool. And what is the grad degree in? Because you said you're in grad school. I know you said you're over there, I believe, at UNC, if I remember correctly. So what is the grad degree in?
It's in social work. So I'm getting my master's of social work degree in the community management and policy practice track over at Chapel Hill.
Okay, well, that's great that you're doing that and everything. Definitely, as I did with Ken, I want to hear your final thoughts on things that you would like to give, or like a positive message or things of that nature. I do have to let you know that you've got at least one good thing going for you and everything. I mean, several of your answers have been great and everything, but I'm also a big lover of animals. And I'm noticing that there's this lovely cat that is off to the side of your shoulder that is definitely enjoying being involved in the interview. So just going to give a shout out to the cat there. I don't know if the cat, I'm sure the cat has a name. So just giving a shout out to the cat as well. So you want to give a shout out to your cat, more than likely and more than glad to do that, because the cat is basically ignoring me, like just going around like, why is this man talking about me? This strange man is talking about me, and I don't know why. So I'm going to go see Mama right now.
That is too funny. Yeah, that's my cat. His name is Booger, because he is a little booger. I love him, though. Definitely words of encouragement. I think what gets me through all of this is knowing that progress happens. It's slow. It takes time. Takes commitment, but it does happen. And if we compare even what we've overcome in the past few months, we're seeing changes. And so don't despair, and know that with time and with commitment, we will see change. And we've already accomplished a lot, even if it doesn't feel like it.
Yep, definitely have accomplished a lot. Definitely are seeing things going on and things of that nature. So as I get ready to wind everything out, we have an ambassador, which is actually one of our producer's daughters, that comes on and does like this video about things that we should do, like washing our hands and covering your mouth when you sneeze and things of that nature. So she comes on as kind of our wrap-up message and everything. But Kim, who's already jumped off, was saying that she was loving how informative, interactive, and responsive the show has been. So I want to thank her for tuning in all the way from California and making her comments known. And she was saying, have a great afternoon, and thanks for the awesome guest. So she was definitely enjoying your conversation as well. And also said that she's donating now and is going to share your site. So you definitely got somebody that was moved by what you were saying and has already made their involvement known all the way from California. So at least we know we've got one person that was watching and they went ahead and did what you like to have done, which is have somebody make donations and things along those lines. So definitely I thought that those were some very good thoughts that you gave and everything. If you got any last thoughts that you want to share, this is your time to do that. If there's anything that you have not mentioned yet, I'll give you that opportunity to do that now while I pull up our lovely brand person and all of that, so that we can bring the ambassador on and bring that within the conversation. So definitely, if you have any final thoughts that you want to share, this is the time to do that now. So Jillian, if you've got any final thoughts, then I would love to hear them at this point.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Mark. It was a pleasure talking with you. It was great to see Ken at the beginning. And yeah, check out my website, jillianriley.org, to learn more about me, see some cool videos, and find out some ways to get involved with the campaign.
Sounds great. So definitely appreciate getting to know you as well. So right now we're going to bring up the ambassador. Hopefully you'll stick around and watch the ambassador as they give us these great hints. And then I'll bring up the information about IBM.TV, and then that will wrap up the show. But definitely right now we'll bring up the ambassador as she gives us some great hints on things that we should be doing to stay safe.
Coronavirus से कैसे बचेंगे? Okay, hand होकर और ऐसे अपने खांसी जब आएगी तो ऐसे करेंगे, अच्छू अच्छू, और कोरोना वायरस को धन्यवाद हमारा म्यूजिक सुनने का.
So like I said, that was our producer Ankit's daughter, his young daughter, and she was giving us some definitely great encouraging words on things we should do in addition to like wearing the mask and everything else. So we do know that we want everybody to be safe in these hard times. But like Jillian said, there is a sunshine around the corner. We may not know when that sunshine is going to be there, but it is definitely sunshine around the corner. And one of the things that I've always been proud of, and it's definitely something that comes out of our activism community, is the fact that no matter what we're going through, we always find ways to get through the darkest times. So even though these are considered dark times, I do know that there is light around the corner, and that we will come out of this in it might be a new world, as they like to say, or a different world, but it will still be in my mind, a world that has a lot of potential and a lot of hope in it, and that we can continue to have that hope and continue to grow and develop and to create the better world that we would all like to see. Because, like I said, we've had a world that has gone through many ups and downs and has gone through all kinds of crises. But through it all, we have always been a resilient people. And by that, I mean all of the humanity has been resilient. And I think we continue to be resilient and that we will continue to develop as well. So that's my thoughts on that. And I'm glad to have both Ken Knox, as well as Jillian Riley as my guests on the online dinner party. And we'll be back next Wednesday with more great guests. And of course, we've got our other two shows on IBM.TV that air on Monday. So one between 2 and 3:45 and the other at this similar time frame and everything of between 4 and 7. I know that I'm talking to a clothier, so they may be coming on talking to us about clothes and things of that nature. I'm usually in my jeans and in my casual shirt, so hopefully they're going to tell me about how I need to up my fashion game and things of that nature. So I might have to learn more about how to up the fashion game and some of their thoughts on that journey. But that's just one of the many guests that we have, and more are being planned on a regular basis, because one of the things that we love to do on IBM.TV, as well as through all our platforms, is have these engaging conversations and these hopeful and positive conversations that are about the unity of humanity, but also about celebration of our diversity. So we like to mix both of those messages, because the messages can work together. We can both be unified as being unified around races, around the gender and the different unity points, whether that's religion, whether that's whatever. But while we can be unified, we can also celebrate our diversity, because I know that I am proud of my African American heritage. I also have some Native heritage as well, and I'm proud of that also. So we can definitely be celebrant of our history, but also be unified in trying to create this better world that we all would like to see happen and that we are working on a regular basis. So we'll bring in the information about IBM.TV, and then after that, we'll hit the end broadcast. I may go into the studio room and just have a quick chat after that with Jillian, but then after that, I've got to jump on another meeting because, like she said, she's very busy, and I find myself usually spending multiple hours doing a lot of things as well. But right now, let's put on the information about IBM.TV, and then I'll wrap this show up. And like I said, might go into a private chat with Jillian in the back room area to talk about the interview and how it went and everything. But then after that, we will definitely have some more great guests and look forward to doing more work in the very near future. But here's the information on IBM.TV.